And welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm going to continue the story What If Naruto Was the Uzumaki Rizzler Part 2. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
As the two ninjas charged at one another, Nagato and every other AIM ninja in the town watched in silent horror. As the dense, dark smoke rushed toward the long spear that was approaching from the sky, everyone experienced a sensation that words could not adequately describe. The dense, black smoke swiftly changed into Naruto just before the two fighters collided. When Nagato saw the insane bloodlust in his best friend's dark red eyes, he shuddered. He also witnessed the AIM ninjas' intense fear as they attempted to come to terms with the fact that this was all real and not merely a dream. Power! Naruto exclaimed. Everyone's spines tingled when he spoke. Nagato recoiled at the intensity of his friend's rage, hatred, and bloodlust as Naruto lifted his right hand and pointed the first two fingers in the direction of the enormous paper weapon spear that was approaching. Kurai Kaminari, dark lightning. As ferocious bolts of dark purple lightning began to shoot from his friend's fingers, Nagato remained stunned. Although he was aware that Naruto was capable of ninjutsu, he had never witnessed his friend fuse his dark abilities with that ninja art, and the consequences were genuinely terrifying. When the lightning bolts and the AIM Kunoichi's deadly spear collided violently, sparks flew everywhere. A few poor AIM ninja were also struck and instantly passed out. When Nagato saw multiple deflected lightning bolts racing towards him, he was not immune to the incoming attacks, and panic broke out on the battlefield as everyone rushed for cover. With his hands already performing a complex series of hand seals, he reached into his pouch and tossed 4 seals into various locations throughout the battlefield. Fuin. The battlefield was covered with a huge, blue, rectangular barrier that shielded him and the AIM ninja from the approaching attacks. Nagato faced his astonished enemies, who were staring at him bewildered. "Stay still and don't leave the barrier, not if you want to die," told Nagato. Nagato merely pointed his fingers at the insanely laughing Naruto as he valiantly resisted Angel's constant assault. "Why should we listen to you?" a young AIM Chunin asked angrily. "Fine. If you want to get slaughtered in the battle between those two, then be my guest," said Nagato. When the AIM ninjas publicly recoiled at the sight of the intense battle, he grinned. The frustrated AIM ninjas' enraged looks at Nagato only made his predicament worse. Nagato could see they had realized they were no match for Naruto. A few of them spat, "Kill him." When Nagato saw the foolish idiots running toward him, his urge to strike something surged, and his eyebrows twitched. From the murderous gleam in their eyes, it was clear that they were determined to kill him. They were so furious that they failed to realize that if he died, the barrier would fall and their lives would be in jeopardy. Not to mention that if they even slightly hurt Nagato, Naruto would give them horrifying deaths. Nagato had to eliminate these foolish AIM ninjas as soon as possible without doing them too much harm for their benefit. After all, their goal was not to kill but to intimidate. As Nagato witnessed his best friend murderously assault the Angel of AIM, he thought sadly, so much for that. Today, Nagato was undoubtedly assured that he would never again sulk at Naruto. He sighed wearily, bringing his tanto forward and concentrating to deal with the waves of AIM ninjas that were poised to charge at him. When he saw that Nagato had set up a barrier to keep those stupid fools safe, Naruto became even more enraged and snarled as the remaining AIM ninjas ran to kill his best friend. Nagato thought angrily, "Your compassion would be the death of you someday, Nagato." His desire to put an end to this conflict was only strengthened by the anger in his heart. This girl, whoever she was good. Although dealing with his barrage of evil attacks was no easy task, Nagato refused to let his friend perish because his life was in danger. Naruto poured more of his chakra into his attack with tremendous force. The spear of paper weapons was ripped clean by the lightning strike, which then ran frantically to hit the slightly startled angel. When Naruto saw the victory in front of him, he couldn't help but smile. He didn't think any of the little fries below him had a chance to defeat him, aside from this girl. But when Angel merely twisted herself slightly, causing the lightning attack to pass from her side, the smirk left his lips. Naruto reluctantly thought, "Impossible. Lightning travels faster than the speed of sound. It seems AIM's not as talentless as I imagined." Naruto was unable to sense any emotion from the girl, which is a testament to her abilities. Not fear, not nervousness, not anger. He felt a little uneasy as she simply gazed at him with her stoic amber eyes. His chakra was already being heavily taxed in order to stay afloat. Only his years of training in chakra control and average chakra reserves allowed him to manipulate wind chakra continuously, which was no small feat. This angel, on the other hand, was just flying by using her paper transformation. It gave her slightly more speed and agility in addition to using less chakra. She was in the lead. As he clasped his hands together, Naruto thought gravely, I guess I'll just have to use brute force to overwhelm her. Kaden. Nenshu Masairu, fire release, burning missile. As her opponent unleashed a raging tornado of flames, Angel of Aim watched patiently. However, they differed from typical fire attacks in that they were completely black in color rather than flaming orange. Even the heat from the flames had an unpleasant, corrosive smell. In addition to burning, they would cause her skin to crumble to ashes if they struck her. She stayed motionless, focusing all of her attention on the looming tornado of flames that soon turned into a massive missile that was aimed directly at her head. She had to give the boy credit for his strength because she noticed his dark smile when he saw her about to move. However, he had a serious flaw. Angel was not shocked when the missile attack broke up into almost 100 smaller missiles. The attack's range expanded, and even with the power imbalance, she was aware that any one missile attack could bring about her destruction. Rather than freaking out, she shut her eyes. Angel changed her entire body into innumerable pieces of paper and scattered them everywhere as soon as the barrage of dark missiles reached her. A number of paper shards were struck by the attack, which totally destroyed them. However, the others began attacking Naruto from all directions, and the Uzumaki was encircled by a tornado of paper shuriken and kunai that were tearing him to pieces. Naruto suppressed a hiss as his skin was ripped apart and he sustained multiple more vicious wounds to his body, causing blood to spill over. In order to defend himself, he rapidly clenched his fist tightly and surrounded his body with a defensive aura of dark chakra. At that moment, he became aware that he had made a what a bloody mistake. Mifune turned around and said, "It's over," with his eyes closed. Moments later, a terrible explosion tore through half of the town, destroying a number of small homes and businesses and scattering rubble in all four directions. With a somewhat dissatisfied look on his face after seeing how the fight turned out, Mifune began to leave. Angel was unbeatable. That's what he'd already said. Since the majority of the Uzumaki were children and didn't deserve to die, he had to go to Hanzo and ask his leader to spare the others. When his friend and fellow commander remained in her position, he scowled. Galatea? Mifune inquired. The blonde woman stood motionless, staring at the now destroyed town. When Mifune saw Galatea gritting her teeth, he had to conceal his surprise as he walked back to stand next to her. Galatea surprised her partner by whispering, "This one is quite strong." Mifune, stunned by what he had just heard, exclaimed, "You mean?" Now that Galatea's anxious eyes were focused on the destroyed town, her fears materialized as the aim lands felt another strong surge of dark chakra. This one is more ferocious and furious. Conan. He did not move from his place. His eyes were focused on the ragged remnants of his shirt, which were scattered on the damp floor. Blood seeped from the deep gash on his chest, leaving the ground beneath him crimson. Though it was slight, Naruto could see that even Angel appeared taken aback by his survival. His adversary had also lowered herself somewhat towards the ground. Naruto, who respected skill and cunning, thought, to think, she sneaked so many exploding tags into the massive paper storm. And to use my own chakra to trigger their ignition, ingenious. Even though she was his enemy, this girl was a worthy adversary. However, the result of her cunning attack on him had been unfavorable. The AIM ninja were totally exposed since the barrier that had shielded them had broken. Naruto saw his best friend battling multiple enemy squads. Numerous AIM soldiers were unconscious on the ground, and a number of others had minor wounds that would make them useless in the conflict. Nagato was doing okay. As he began his hand seals, Naruto thought savagely, two can play this game. When the dangerous boy slammed his hand on the damp ground, Angel braced herself. When she saw him smirk, her eyes widened in horror. He had deceived her. Doden. Doria, Saw, Earth Release, Earth Flow Spears. Naruto shifted the course of his attack at the last second. Hundreds of earthen spears rose from the ground, catching almost every AIM ninja in their grasp, and he enjoyed the silent horrified look that came into the girl's eyes. Even though there wasn't enough blood to kill their wounds, their screams ripped through the town as streams of blood spurted from their wounded bodies. When the few who were spared his attack saw their terribly wounded comrades, they shivered in horror. Angel's eyes widened a little, showing her pain and rage at the state of her fellow soldiers. She gave the boy a fierce glare and realized she had made a grave error. Dakwiryojan, Dark Illusions. As it attached itself to her shock, pain, and rage, she felt a powerful presence rip through her mental defenses. She had never experienced such a force in her life. In spite of her frantic efforts, It broke down all of her barriers and caused her world to burst with agony. When their unbeatable angel screamed, the remaining AIM ninja were astounded by what they saw. She fell to her knees, every muscle in her body trembling from the pain that was coursing through it. She knew this was a trick, an illusion, but she still couldn't help but scream in pain. She caught a glimpse of the boy's ruthless gaze as he gripped the hand that controlled the illusion. Her screams grew louder as the pain got worse. Her fellows attempted to save her, but were knocked unconscious by the boy's comrade's swift sweep. With a relieved expression on his face after all of their adversaries were vanquished, Nagato arrived at Naruto's side. Naruto continued to stare at the struggling angel of AIM as he gave the order, "Go to the mountains." "Okay, but don't you think you are better suited?" When Nagato saw the murderous expression in those red eyes, he stopped talking. Nagato winced as Naruto said icily, "You're going to be our clan leader. I've done my part in clearing your way, the rest is up to you." Nagato questioned hesitantly, "What if they refuse?" The angel screamed even louder as Naruto clenched his fist tighter, seemingly in response to his question. The girl refused to give up, and Nagato had to turn away when he noticed tears beginning to well up in her eyes due to the excruciating pain. "Then they can forget about ever seeing any of these warriors alive," told Naruto. Nagato curtly replied, "Understood." He was obviously unhappy with the approach taken, but his best friend didn't seem to mind. Nagato sighed and began running quickly in the direction of the mountains where they had sensed Hanzo's presence. A part of him was anxious because, in addition to the future of his clan, the lives of the defenseless AIM ninja were also in jeopardy, not to mention his own. Nagato was certain that if something went wrong or if Nagato was hurt, his best friend would not think twice about carrying out his threat to kill all of those AIM ninjas, including Angel. Because of his strong senses, Naruto would be aware of any danger to his friend. At this point, Nagato understood why Naruto had declined to become a clan leader. Since his friend was a combat-trained soldier rather than a diplomat, he was not qualified for that position. Nevertheless, Nagato was appreciative of his friend in spite of his perverted behavior. Nagato had worked hard to make this mission work, and he was going to do everything in his power to ensure that everyone survived this mess. There was nothing else for him. Galatea, distraught, would have charged straight into the town to rescue her apprentice and their soldiers from that monstrous boy. But Mifune had held tight to her shoulders. He still found it difficult to believe that Angel had lost. He had misjudged this clan. They were now paying the price for his underestimation of this enigmatic boy. Galatea hissed, her silvery eyes blazing with rage, "Let me go, Mifune." With a glare in return, Mifune said sadly, "If I do so, then you will be violating Hanzo's orders. I can't let you do that, no matter what." "But Conan, I'm not heartless, Galatea. I know how grave the situation, but think about it tactfully. Our soldiers are now hostages and are at the enemy's mercy. If you recklessly charge in, you will risk not only Conan's life but that of all our soldiers. We have to give the enemy a chance to state their demands." Mifune patiently clarified. Galatea questioned incredulously, "Are we negotiating with people who attacked our nation?" Mifune was comforted when Galatea closed her eyes in defeat, saying, "You know that's not entirely true. I know how you feel, but trust Hanzo. He won't let any harm befall on his own soldiers, especially on Angel." Galatea cautioned, "If anything happens to her, then we'll make sure the enemy pays for their crimes. But it won't come to that, Galatea. Have faith," Mifune insisted. Galatea cursed a few expletives and returned her focus to the single chakra signature that was slowly but surely getting closer to where they were. Akeno sat on her summoned vulture with trepidation. The Uzumaki kids gathered around her cover in silence, terrified. They had all witnessed the terrible conflict taking place on the battlefield, but it was the moment that that dark chakra was released that had frightened them. Even in the illusioned state, the children still sensed that dark power a little, which made them approach her for solace. Akeno had to use genjutsu to prevent the frightened kids from panicking, something she was happy to provide. She was concerned about her closest pals. She was compelled to stay here rather than be with them, and every second seemed to drag on forever. However, she had never witnessed Naruto publicly employing his cursed power to this degree before. It was strong and dangerous, but she had sensed the force behind this power. She had experienced his hurt, pain, anguish, and rage. That dark power was fueled by those feelings, and Akeno knew her friend had experienced enough in his life to naturally feel those feelings. She had experienced the bloodlust as well, and it frightened her. As the boy fought next to Naruto, Akeno could only speculate as to how Nagato must be feeling. She hoped Cammy would give both of her friends the fortitude to live and return to her because she was at least experiencing all of these things from a distance. Neither of them could be lost by her, regardless of how annoying the boys might be at times. A single tear dropped from Akino's silvery eyes as she prayed, "Please be okay." Conan watched in silence as her adversary completed enclosing her wounded allies in a sealed barrier that one of the red-headed boy's clones was keeping up. All over her body, he had already strapped chakra suppression seals and bound her in ninja wire. Even though she found it hard to believe, the reality that she was defeated. She tried to cope with this humiliation by clenching her fists tightly. In addition to failing to protect her country and her fellow ninjas, she was also unable to keep her word to him and fulfill her ninja oath. She stared at that boy, her eyes hardened. She smirked silently as she saw the deep, nasty cut across his chest. She had at least made him pay for the suffering he had inflicted on her people and prevented him from winning with ease. He was panting heavily, and Conan could see the perspiration trickling down his brow and his hands shaking. "You can't control it, can you?" The boy turned to face her as she asked. She couldn't help but notice the uninterested expression in his eyes. Only a few minutes before, he had been hankering after her blood, and now that the fight was over, she didn't matter to him. It made her feel resentful and wounded her pride in being a strong kunoichi. Sincerely, Naruto remarked, "You fought well, it's a shame you were my opponent." Conan blinked. She really didn't think he would say anything, much less recognize her abilities. Perhaps this enigmatic boy was more than just his deranged demeanor and evil abilities. Conan asked sharply, "Why did you attack my country?" Her response was that uninterested look once more. She went on, "What are your intentions?" He smiled at her, amused this time. Naruto bluntly questioned, "You do realize that you are my prisoner right now and not the other way around?" He saw the girl roll her eyes, and his face mask did a commendable job of concealing his smile. Despite the fact that her fate was in his hands, she had not the slightest fear of him. He was unsure of the reason behind his next words. To the surprise of both the girl and himself, Naruto declared, "I won't kill you or your comrades." Conan responded sarcastically, "You've done an admirable job so far," and smiled inwardly when he blushed a little. "I didn't want to, I don't have to explain anything to you," Naruto said nervously, but the girl smiled amusedly. He found the gesture to be quite soothing for some reason. Conan's eyebrows twitched in irritation as he asked, "What's your name, boy?" Naruto said, "Shut up, old hag," and smiled as the girl gave him a deadly glare, her eyebrows twitching in unison. He shook his head, wrenching his eyes from the annoying but fascinating girl. He stared at the mountains, and his mind kept returning to Nagato. Naruto felt bad about putting Nagato in that predicament, and his friend was about to enter a dangerous situation. However, it was required. His fate and the fate of the rest of his clan would be determined tonight. Unbeknownst to his fellows, this was his last resort, so he didn't even want to think about what would happen if this mission failed. In addition to securing a stable future for them to live in, he was running out of places to take them and keep them safe. The accomplishment of this mission was crucial to his own revolutionary plans. And he had trusted his best friend with everything. Since he usually preferred working alone, it felt odd to him to entrust such a significant task to another person for the first time. Naruto could only hope that his best friend fulfilled all of their demands. Unable to conceal his anxiety, Naruto muttered, "I'm counting on you, Nagato." The final portion of the mountain was climbed by a weary, distraught-looking boy. He was panting heavily, his uniform was ripped in several places, blood was dripping from the small cuts all over his body, and his eyes were clearly tired. Nagato Uzumaki had seen better days, it was safe to say. This crazy mission, which he had started on his crazy friend's orders, was turning out to be the most difficult task he had ever faced. First, traveling non-stop for days on end, then engaging in a brutal battle with numerous foes, then sprinting for kilometers at maximum speed, and finally scaling a steep mountain and almost dying. And about to confront a man who is feared by all ninjas. Nagato muttered, "I swear I'm gonna kill you, Naruto." "Commander." When Nagato looked up, he saw a middle-aged man and a stunning woman standing in front of him. The woman had spoken to the older-looking samurai-like man while donning the uniform of a high-ranking AIM ninja. It was this. He was unable to fail. The future of his clan and his friends rested on him. He's not going to fail. Nagato struggled to get back up on his unsteady feet. He was getting close to chakra exhaustion and had partially dark vision. He had just made it a few paces toward the wary ninjas before his weary legs failed him and he fell to his knees. Before a harsh voice sent shivers down his spine, he heard footsteps approaching his position. Let him walk. The boy hasn't arrived before me yet. As soon as Nagato's eyes met Salamander Hanzo's face, his blurry vision immediately cleared. Nagato understood why people were afraid of the tall AIM leader as he stood proudly in front of him. Nagato felt a tremendous and powerful power from Hanzo, which made him summon all his strength to resist whimpering under this man's stern stare. As his hands began to shake, he recalled Naruto's declaration that he was proud to be an Uzumaki. With a critical eye, Hanzo saw the once anxious boy shakily get back up and begin limping in his direction, using his tanto as support. Hanzo respected the boy's bravery because of the resolute expression in his eyes. Nagato thought passionately, I have to walk. I won't cower. A proud Uzumaki never gives up. No matter what, as he saw the faces of his Azukage and his fallen clansmen who had fought bravely to the end. He arrived before Salamander Hanzo and stood confidently in front of the man because of their sacrifice. Nagato was not afraid at this moment. No one would stop him because he knew what he had to do. He saw Hanzo watching him with the same stern look. Nagato said politely, I'm glad to finally meet you, Hanzo-sama. Hanzo asked in the same stern tone that made Nagato look him in the eye, what is your name, boy? Nagato Uzumaki. Even the elderly man, who resembled a samurai, raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard the woman gasp in surprise at the mention of his clan's name. But Hanzo appeared to be just as unaffected as he had been prior to the disclosure. So what kind of threat have you come to make after attacking my nation, my soldiers? Replied Hanzo icily. Nagato felt Hanzo release some of his power along with that heinous intent to kill, and it took everything he had not to pass out there. Nagato steadied himself and clenched his fists. He would not mess this up. When Nagato honestly responded, we don't offer any threat but offer the prospect of an alliance beneficial to both our sides. Hanzo gave him a critical look. By holding my soldiers hostage against me? Tell me, boy, have you killed any of them? Murmured Hanzo. It is a necessary step to protect my people. We can't be too trusting in these troubled times, yet I give you my word that none of your warriors have been killed or will be killed no matter the outcome of this meeting. We deeply regret creating this situation, but it was unavoidable, replied Nagato openly. He was taken aback when Hanzo spoke and hardly raised his eyebrows at those words. So what happens now? Hanzo inquired. Nagato cautiously stated, if you wish peace and coexistence, then an alliance, and if not, and observed the tall man narrow his eyes dangerously. If not? Hanzo asked perilously. Nagato's vision began to deteriorate, but he forced himself to take a deep breath. The slightest bit more, just a bit more. If not, then something else at the least, because I didn't come here to offer a one-sided surrender, Nagato honestly replied. Despite his commanders closely observing the exchange, Hanzo said nothing. When the flames of war reach aim, there is a way to protect this great nation. I can tell you how to achieve it, if you listen to me with an open mind. Maybe then we can truly work together for a peaceful, new world. Nagato looked around at the three individuals. The pivotal moment came when he turned to face Hanzo and met the stoic man's gaze directly. He was already near death and had done everything he could to complete his mission. What shall it be, Hanzo-sama? Akeno had witnessed her two best friends fighting only a few times in her life. Generally, Nagato agreed with Naruto's judgments and viewpoints. Naruto was also prepared to put up with his friend's kindness as long as Nagato didn't bug him about morals. However, something had occurred, something significant. Nagato's current glare at Naruto was the most murderous she had ever seen him glare at. At the moment, the three of them were waiting for AIM's leader and his top advisors to arrive in Hanzo's throne room. Although she was unaware of Nagato's words to the influential man, they had at least persuaded Hanzo to give them an opportunity to argue their case. A miracle occurred. Akeno couldn't help but be astounded by Nagato's current display of confidence and fire. She had a suspicion as to who was responsible for the gradual transformation of the obedient, unsophisticated boy she had known. Whatever Naruto was doing, she had to acknowledge that it was making Nagato a nice mana and eventually a capable leader. Meanwhile, Naruto stood on the other side of the room. The redhead's face was hidden behind his face mask, his back against the pillar. Despite Nagato's homicidal glances, the boy was merely indifferent, his hand securely tucked around his chest. Akeno was aware that Nagato would have screamed at Naruto like there was no tomorrow if it weren't for the crucial negotiations that were about to take place, simply because he seemed so angry. She herself disapproved of Naruto's completion of this mission, which involved keeping his closest friends in the dark about his true motivations and strategy. Naruto was just obstinate and usually got his way, even if it hurt. The fact that they still trusted their friend and knew he had their best interests at heart was the only thing keeping them from yelling at him. It was only his behavior that was suspect. "You did good." She had never heard him speak before. As Naruto finished speaking, she noticed that he was staring straight at Nagato. Akeno tried to hide her astonished expression, but it was impossible. Only Naruto himself could often meet his expectations, and he hardly ever gave praise to others. It was shocking to see him genuinely complimenting Nagato. And based on the boy's open mouth and quivering lips, it appeared that Nagato was also in disbelief. Naruto smiled a little, melancholy, at the look on his friend's face. "I'm sorry for putting all of you through everything that has happened in the past few months. Rest assured, you won't have to bear it any longer," whispered Naruto quietly. The chamber doors on the far side of the room opened before either of his friends could question him about his statement. A crowd of people, led by Salamander Hanzo, entered. In this group, Nagato also recognized the samurai commander and the attractive blonde woman he had met before. Akeno suppressed a gasp as she saw Hanzo for the first time next to him. Hanzo passed by Naruto, who was still wearing his expressionless mask, but not before giving the boy a curious look. When Angel or Conan joined the group, he grinned silently. Despite their awkward first encounter, he respected the girl's abilities and had to concede that she had an odd name. He just didn't give a damn about the other members of the group, especially the elderly man and woman in civilian clothes who were giving him deadly looks. In the group, he also noticed a young boy who was almost their age and had orange hair that was spiky. They looked at one another inquisitively and then parted ways. Naruto sarcastically thought, "At least not everyone thinks that I'm a freak." He could only imagine Akino's reaction if he spoke his mind aloud. But he knew in his heart that it was true. His abilities were twisted and unnatural. They made him feel something evil that threatened to ruin everything he valued. His friends would never understand why he had to do this, but as long as they were safe and content, he could continue to live until his time came. To his credit, he did smile when Hanzo and his group took their seats and the AIM leader turned to face him. To Hanzo's surprise, Naruto merely nodded when he said, "I've already heard through Nagato's proposal of an alliance between AIM and the Uzumaki, or what's left of them anyway. You know what advantage the Uzumaki can provide you. Despite AIM's increased strength, your ninja are weak in comparison to those of the Grade 5. Bluntly stated Naruto. He heard Nagato and Akeno gasp behind him, and many of Hanzo's supporters, especially the older civilian couple, gave him a number of stern looks. Naruto maintained his defiant gaze as Hanzo leaned forward and looked at him intently. As Conan and the orange-haired boy turned to face Naruto, Hanzo said bluntly, "I can pardon Nagato and the rest of your clan. But not you." Something happened before either Akeno or Nagato could defend their friend. To prevent Nagato from interfering, Naruto raised his hand and said honestly, "Understandable. I planned this mission, none of my people knew exactly what they were getting into. I assume full responsibility." She also held back from speaking after giving Akeno a stern look. He turned to see Hanzo grinning at him in surprise. Hanzo asked inquisitively, "I see, so you're the leader hiding in the shadow of Nagato?" But the boy shook his head. "I'm a soldier, nothing more. Nagato speaks for all of us, but each of us have a freedom to voice their opinions. That is just how we Uzumaki are," boldly stated Naruto. Mifune went rigid when Hanzo said, "You know I can actually kill all of you?" in a sinister tone. Galatea and Conan appeared uneasy. The boy with the orange hair wanted to object, but the elderly civilian couple appeared to support this action. When Hanzo noticed the Uzumaki boy approaching him, Galatea moved forward, but Hanzo stopped her. He saw the boy ascend the steps and arrive at the throne where Hanzo was sitting. His supporters were poised to leap to his defense at his side, but Hanzo's gaze was solely focused on this boy. The icy stare that fell on Hanzo was enough to chill his supporters to the bone. "I will personally slaughter as many of your people as I can, cripple your nation just before the greatest war of our world. You will destroy yourself and all your dreams, and to destroy the Uzumaki will be the end of you. I swear it," Naruto said killerously, his dark chakra starting to dangerously spike, making everyone around him shudder. "Before we perish, we will burn AIM to the ground." Every ninja in the area positioned their weapons around Naruto's entire body, ready to attack at any moment, but he didn't flinch. "There are a lot of innocent kids in your clan," Hanzo said ominously, "if my people die, so will yours." He saw the boy's eyes briefly soften before the defiance returned. "The worst of this world has already been shown to me. I'm not afraid of your baseless threats, Salamander Hanzo, declared Naruto defiantly. Since their friend was standing far away and Naruto's voice was hardly more than a whisper, neither Nagato nor Akano knew what was happening, but they could only speculate about the mayhem Naruto might be causing based on the weapons aimed at him and the tense atmosphere, which is why they were taken aback when Hanzo smirked and leaned back in his chair. Every Uzumaki will have a place in this country, I promise. If they pledge allegiance to AIM and its leaders, they will all be granted citizenship, Hanzo stated gravely, loud enough for the two Uzumaki who were still present to hear. After giving his friends a quick glance, Naruto turned back to face Hanzo, his blue eyes displaying mistrust. Because of our knowledge, other villages massacred my people because they were different. If you even come close to touching my people, Naruto was taken aback when Hanzo stood up again, forcing his followers to move aside to make room. The AIM leader gazed into the young boy's eyes, and the message was evident in those eyes. Those men are not me. Salamander Hanzo is who I am. Naruto's unrelenting gaze pierced Hanzo's eyes, and for some reason, he turned to face Konan, who also oddly nodded. He could see how equally shocked the girl was by her own behavior, and he saw Mifune staring at him indifferently, Galatea seeming doubtful but remaining silent, the odd orange-haired boy grinning slightly, and the civilians glaring at him even more angrily. He glanced at his friends once more, and he saw the hope in their eyes and the growing happiness in their gazes as Akano smiled hopefully at him and Nagato nodded. The Uzumaki clan then makes a commitment to AIM on these terms. We will follow the laws of these countries, trust the government, embrace the AIM people as fellow citizens, and defend this country against all enemies, both internal and foreign, Naruto pledged. Hanzo nodded firmly in agreement with the oath taken. How about you? Raising his eyebrows at the man, Hanzo asked, surprising Naruto. How about me? Inquiring, Naruto it was difficult to describe, but something about the boy in front of her seemed different to Konan. Perhaps it was his abilities or his defiance in publicly opposing Salamander Hanzo, but it was safe to say that she had never seen anyone like Naruto Uzumaki. However, his name was a joke and incredibly annoying. Why would anyone name their child after fish cake? Your friends and clan took the oath. Not you, Hanzo said gravely, causing the boy to grin. While I appreciate the offer, I'll pass. Beside him, Mifune was shocked to see Hanzo smile faintly for the first time in 10 years as he stared in the boy's eyes. The others didn't understand, but Mifune could feel what Hanzo felt as he watched this boy standing before him. Hanzo could not help but be surprised despite seeing the shocked looks on the boy's friends' faces and the anger in his own ninja's eyes for such an open rejection. Your qualities will be known to this world for a long time, Uzumaki Naruto. The sudden praise that was lavished on this boy made Konan gasp, and the fact that Hanzo hardly ever gave praise to anyone, including her, made her heart tighten even more. Even Hanzo couldn't help but laud Naruto Uzumaki. Who was he? Nagato and Akano, on the other hand, were taken aback by what transpired next. To everyone's surprise, Naruto bowed deeply before Hanzo, who understood his request without using words and nodded confidently. Naruto's gaze then turned to Konan, who was staring at him. He could see a wide range of emotions in her eyes, and he surprised her by nodding to her as well. Without waiting for her answer, he glanced at the other AIM people indifferently before making his way to the doors. Even though he had been prepared for this, his heart tightened at the sight of his friend's reaction. Nagato was looking at his friend with a new sense of panic, and his anger had gone. Naruto could see that his friend was already trying to come up with reasons or ways to keep him. But he felt depressed and perhaps even guilty because of Akano. He didn't want to, but there was no other option but to look away or risk letting her see his own tears welling up. He couldn't even look into her eyes. Hanzo must have sensed his discomfort and hesitation because the AIM leader called his friends to distract them from him, which allowed him the time he needed to get to the exit and leave. Now he had to leave. He made a quiet hissing sound as he opened the medium-sized door in front of him, but instead of entering the room, Naruto stayed at the doorway, staring at the form of the contented Uzumaki children sleeping soundly in their beds. His heart skipped a beat, knowing that everything he had endured over the previous few months had been worthwhile. He felt guilty, though, because he had failed at his task, and nearly every child in this room had lost their parents, friends, or family as a result. His Azukage had given him the task with such assurance, but he had failed. As they lay murdered in the lands of Fire Nation, he could still see the faces of all his clan members who had died, and their frightened looks kept him awake at night. To say goodbye, he took a tentative step forward, but he stopped himself when he realized who he was. In contrast to the empathetic Nagato or the gregarious and upbeat Akano, He was the frightful older brother. Having witnessed the cautious and occasionally even frightened looks these kids directed at him, he truly understood their motivations, but it still hurt in the back of his mind. What's worse is that he knew they were right, being close to him could only cause them pain, suffering, and dangers for which they weren't yet ready. Despite his deep desire to get to know these kids, he had not made any significant attempts to do so because he did not know how or had the time. It was all worthwhile when he thought of the future his two friends would have with these kids, and a nostalgic smile appeared on his lips. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. He then gave his clan's future one last look, grinned, and slipped slowly into the shadowy hallways while carrying a tiny thought with him. I am nothing but darkness, but you are all our clan's light. Will you ever remember me, I wonder? Seeing the self-assured girl in front of him made Hanzo very happy, but it was still difficult to believe that a few years ago this simple girl was just another of AIM's innumerable war orphans, and now years later, Conan was not only one of the strongest ninjas of this country but also his heir. Hanzo rarely took a break during crucial negotiations because he always believed in getting the job done, no matter what. Hanzo had long since given up on the idea of starting his own family in order to realize his dream of a world without conflict. He didn't really care about it because his aspirations for change were more significant than this, but meeting this girl changed his life because she had a certain quality that caught his attention, a fire that Hanzo desired in AIM's next leader. Would you mind telling me why you brought me here? Hanzo asked, letting go of his strict demeanor for once. His voice sounded much more normal and friendly because he had faith in Conan and knew that she never did anything without a good reason. Conan started to say, "First, I want to apologize for," but was cut off when Hanzo held up his hand. Losing to someone more powerful than you is not a source of shame. If you hadn't given it your all, it would have been a true defeat. Every battle error you make will help you improve as a shinobi and teach you your weaknesses. As the blue-haired girl lowered her gaze, Hanzo calmly explained, "Always remember, Conan, there is no greater teacher for a person in this world than the person himself." Conan muttered, "I know, but I promised," and then she felt a firm hand resting on her shoulder. "Let me decide whether or not you violated our agreement. You get it?" Conan only gave a tentative nod in response to Hanzo's patient question, but his firm tone made it clear that the conversation was over. "You only wanted to talk about that? Because I should return to the negotiations if it is. Since their comrade is leaving, Nagato and Akeno are already under a lot of stress. If I hadn't insisted on formally forming our alliance, they would have long since left to pursue other interests." She nodded as Hanzo underlined, "But now more than ever, I need to solidify this treaty." "Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss." Hanzo smirked and raised his eyebrows when Conan proposed, "There is a way we can secure AIM's future and pacify those two. If this idea of mine works, then you may actually earn the full loyalty of the Uzumaki without the need of an oath." "What are you thinking of?" She would get her little payback, Conan thought, grinning. It had been almost 30 minutes since their best friend had left this room and their lives without even looking back. Nagato and Akeno were pacing wildly through the long rooms of Salamander Hanzo. Back then, they had thought that Naruto would change his mind, but they should have known that boy was obstinate. They had all heard Naruto say that he would never serve any other flag but Uzu. Tragically, Akeno uttered, "I can't believe he would do this to us." It would have been very challenging to negotiate such a significant alliance when both parties were in such distressed states, so Nagato was grateful that Hanzo's supporters had also left the room when their leader had walked out to take a break. What on earth is the fool going to do? Is there a plan at all? Where is he going? He is so careless and impetuous that he keeps talking endlessly about his big plan. As Akeno slumped in Nagato's arms, unable to control her tears, she felt strong arms grab her shoulders, and then a moment later, she felt herself being comfortingly embraced. "I can't lose him, Nagato," Akeno muttered, her voice shaking so much that he felt sorry for her because of the suffering she was going through. Nagato angrily uttered, "I won't let that happen, Akeno." Akeno's tears stopped when she saw the resolve in his eyes, and he broke the hug slightly, cupping both of her cheeks in his hands and staring directly into the girl's troubled eyes. "You won't lose him as long as I'm here, no matter what, I swear," Nagato vowed. "Nagato." Without faltering, he wiped away her tears and gave her a gentle pat on the cheek, which helped her relax a bit. "Akeno, you have to keep in mind. His life was not typical like ours, and he bears a heavy burden." "Unfortunately," Nagato said, "I understand why he does these things, but I'm not making excuses for his behavior because I'm just as mad as you are about his reckless antics. Nagato, I'm not sure how you manage. I genuinely care about him. In fact, I even love him, but I don't care." How can you even sympathize with him and not be angry with him for harming us? He drives me crazy. After Naruto made a decision without even consulting them, Akeno asked angrily, her fiery temper erupting with good reason. Nagato smiled calmly at her in return, because he's my best friend. She was stopped by that. Akeno gazed at her friend's smiling figure. The response was straightforward, but she knew that only someone like Nagato could say such a thing and truly mean it. Nagato was that kind of person, and their team had survived these difficult years because of his understanding and patience. While Akeno was absorbed in her own thoughts, Nagato was not unaware of her near disclosure of her secret feelings. In fact, it was the first time he had witnessed Akeno almost reveal her feelings for a certain rebel named Uzumaki. In all honesty, he had no idea what to think of it. He just knew that he wanted the best for both of his friends and that it was their responsibility to resolve this matter. Unless they specifically requested his assistance or advice, he was going to stand aside and let them deal with it on their own. And since Akeno had now calmed down, he made the decision to explain a few things to her in the hopes that perhaps she wouldn't enrage Naruto so much when he returned. Akeno, I believe Naruto is aware of his goals but is unsure of the precise means by which they can be realized. He hasn't had a typical upbringing like us and has spent the majority of his life alone. He just has no idea how to act around people, let alone coexist with them. And for that reason, he pushes everyone away, Nagato said calmly. Why? Akeno asked in a painful tone, out of fear of rejection and of being left behind once more. He was altered by what his parents did to him. Akeno snapped. Her long-suppressed rage erupted over Naruto and his parents once more. Regardless of the reason, they should not have left their son in such a way. It was worse than an orphanage, but she was also unable to be as understanding as Nagato. Naruto's life was cruel and harsh, but that was insufficient justification for his resistance to change. Indeed, he struggled in relationships. It was up to her to make Naruto realize his shortcomings because he had to work hard to build good ones. It was easy and convenient for Naruto to push people away and stay away, and he would do so to suit himself. Nagato had a soft spot for his best friend and always would. And it would begin when she and Nagato brought him back together. Although Naruto was not going to enjoy this and it was not going to be easy, they and she refused to give him an option. Akeno sulked, "You're done, Naruto Uzumaki." The chamber door opened and Hanzo returned with the smirking girl, as if even the heavens were in agreement with her desire. Akeno was unable to explain why she felt such a great deal of annoyance when she saw this girl, even though she knew Conan had done her no wrong. Additionally, Akeno was certain that Conan was up to no good based on the arrogant smirk on her lips. What on earth is she doing? Aim's reigns were described as unrelenting and never-ending. As he sat in the middle of one of Aim's wastelands, constantly soaked by rain, he realized that the myth was real and that he had been mistaken. He had never completely believed this fact, believing that no place could ever be haunted by rain for all eternity. It proved that there were a lot of things in this world about which he was ignorant. In such a harsh and icy environment, he bit back the chill his body was about to release. He had left his friends and clan in the capital of Aim 2 days prior. Honestly, Naruto wasn't sure how he felt about his choice. From a tactical standpoint, he knew that his choice was correct because he could never allow himself to be Aim's soldier. He was determined to keep his word to Uzu until the end of his life because he just couldn't betray it. Now that his clan was safe, he had other dreams to pursue, even if that hadn't been an issue. Furthermore, if he was a registered Aim ninja, he couldn't carry them out because any trouble he caused would be bad for both his clan and this tiny country. He couldn't allow that to occur, whatever the case. Nevertheless, a tiny part of him regretted abandoning his friends. Never once had he waited to bid farewell. The only family he had in this world, they were his home. Additionally, he was unable to control the tears that welled up in his eyes as he sat by himself in this wasteland. He missed his calm moments with Nagato and his friendly banter with Akeno. He really missed it all. As he came to terms with the things he had lost in his life, the rain that was falling on him rendered his tears invisible. Some because of his own choices, and many because of what other people did. He had already messaged Kisame to ask for the most recent information on the impending conflict. Perhaps he would hear back from the Kiri ninja in a day or two. Naruto fervently hoped it would arrive sooner because it would give him a sense of direction. A new mission that will enable him to realize his dream of a world without conflict. If he were to fulfill his dream one day, millions of innocent people would be able to live happy lives in addition to his friends. In order to prevent the Uzumaki clan's tragedy from ever happening again. The thought of all those forces wreaking havoc around the world made his eyes harden. The Hokages and the military governments, or more precisely, the 5 great villages. Crazy monsters like Orochimaru, corrupted daimyos, and unruly Black Ops forces like the ones he had witnessed in Konoha. The list went on and on. As he reflected on the horrors he had seen over the last few months, he felt a surge of rage. His chakra flared dangerously, and the few plants around him withered away. He would hold everyone accountable. His eyes briefly widened as he sensed multiple repulsive presences in the distance. The odd thing was that he could sense the rage, bloodlust, and insanity within these human beings. These energy imprints were vile and corrupted. He felt the presence of almost 100 civilians, and his eyes widened as he expanded his sensory range in shock. Naruto exclaimed, "A small village, perhaps." He sensed what was about to happen and knew it. The war had begun, and now it had come to aim. In addition to the dangerous ninja villages, there were a number of other, far more dangerous groups and organizations. He started forward but stopped abruptly. It was the AIM ninjas' responsibility to protect their people, not his. They would soon learn of the attack. He was already close to the borders, and it would only take him a day or two to leave this country. However, he would only face more issues if he followed his heart's guidance. At this point, Naruto let out a loud curse. He wasn't loyal to the people of AIM. He wasn't their guardian or soldier. However, he found himself reliving the night of the massacre of his own clan. His own people's cries of helplessness, their anguish and fear as they were killed. They didn't deserve that, and he knew with sorrow that AIM's civilians didn't either. They were human, too. Let your darkness be your greatest strength rather than your worst enemy. He recalled what his Uzukage had told him while he was training. Although Naruto didn't understand the man at the time, he now understood what his leader desired. And obeying his Uzukage's wishes was the only thing he did obediently. In situations where innocent lives were at risk, Katsuro-sama would not have left. Naruto, as his pupil, would not either. Screams of terror echoed through Han, a tiny village. This village, which was named in honor of their great leader Hanzo, was just another of AIM's poor little villages where unemployment, illness, and poverty were rampant. Overall, it lacked any unique qualities that would have justified such a savage assault. Several of its inhabitants had now left their crimson blood on Han's grounds. Everyone could hear the cries of frightened women and children, as well as the groans of the dying men who were the first to be singled out and killed one by one. Across the village, there was another sound: laughter. The attackers let out savage, disgusting chuckles. For the defenseless people of Han, they represented the height of monsters, clad in dark black robes with skull masks over their faces. The residents of the village cowered in horror as a strange, serpentine figure composed of green energy floated over them. "Take that, you bitch. Oh, I'm gonna enjoy this. This is the ultimate fun." From a distance, Naruto gazed at these repulsive creatures. Every human, woman, and child that stood in their way was being killed by the animals. His blood boiled when he saw several small children lying butchered on the damp ground. He was deeply affected by the sight because it brought to mind the massacre of his own people, their cries. His entire chakra then erupted in a deadly flare. Naruto roared, "I'm gonna kill all of you." He exuded a foul energy that spread in all directions as dark chakra oozed from his body at alarming levels. As the ferocious assailants watched in horror as a dark demonic skull engulfed their formidable serpent-like symbol in the sky, the slaughter came to an end. Something landed directly in the middle of the village, causing the ground to tremble violently and scatter dust and debris all over the place. The attackers swiftly surrounded the individual standing in the middle of this dust after losing all interest in the civilians. When they saw his eyes, they all retreated a step. "Demon eyes, pure and red. Who is this guy?" inquired one of the men wearing skull masks. "Reinforcements," another person said. The young man with gray hair yelled, "Let's demonstrate the real strength of our lord to these weaklings. AIM's ninjas are weak as fuck." He raised his hideous scythe and aimed it at the boy, while his fellows raised their long blood-stained scythes and smiled ominously. "So you think Kami is real?" The boy's voice was hardly more than a whisper as he asked. "Yes, absolutely." The young, gray-haired man yelled, "Tell you what, brat, just die and be honored for becoming Jashin-sama's sacrifice." His fellows roared in agreement. The boy with the red eyes smiled madly at them, and they all retreated a step. "Then let me show you the power of Kami." Dark tendrils of chakra shot forward, encircling their entire group in its binds before any of them could respond to the brat. Rather than being frightened, the men all laughed and stared at the boy incredulously. One of them proudly shouted, "Humans cannot kill us. We are eternal." The boy cautioned, "I wouldn't be so sure about that." As the civilians watched their attackers being repeatedly slammed against one another, They were shocked to see the tendrils dancing wildly in the air. The grief-stricken people of Han found some solace in their agonizing screams, and they couldn't help but gaze at this boy with awe and newfound devotion. The boy grinned gloomily as he saw the masked men who were murdering others being murdered themselves. The boy said, "Kill or be killed, that's the law of this world." He scowled as he gazed at the civilians who were devotedly staring back at him. Naruto gave stern advice, to which he received terrified nods in return. "It's better to hurt others before they hurt you, don't forget that." He observed the group of men attempting to use their scythes to cut through the dark tendrils that were imprisoning them, but their weapons only managed to pass through the chakra without releasing them. The young boy merely frowned at the sight. "I'm not the one who's wrong. What's wrong is this. Fucked up world," screamed Naruto. He hurled the entire group of attackers hundreds of meters away, causing them to land directly outside the village, as his chakra violently flared. When he heard their agonizing screams, he smirked and hurried over to them. As he got closer to them, he noticed their frightened looks, which made his heart race. "You bastard!" When some of them charged at Naruto, he laughed. Murder burning in their hearts and eyes burning with unadulterated rage. If only the idiots were aware. All of them suddenly stopped the very next second after he merely pointed his finger at them. When their attacking comrades went to their knees and began to scream in agony, their fellows couldn't help but be even more appalled. The foul-mouthed, gray-haired young man was staring at Naruto, his eyes flashing with fear. "I'm sorry, I forgot your name." Dark chakra tendrils shot up from the ground beneath the man, impaling him all over his body before he could save himself. The boy laughed as one of the tendrils swung menacingly around him and then pierced one of his eyes, causing him to scream. Curious, Naruto asked, "What's your name?" Hidan. The group of men flinched as Naruto glared at them. "Before I squash all of you like the vermin you are, tell me who sent you here." With pain, Hidan uttered, "We are followers of Jashin-sama. We follow nobody but our God. Kill in his name." As the boy ruthlessly churned the tendrils impaling his body, Naruto let out a sigh. Human idiots. He was nevertheless fascinated by these men's strength. All of them had multiple deadly wounds on their bodies, wounds that ought to have killed them long ago. They should have died from the sheer volume of blood they had lost, but they were still alive. He entered Hidan's head and met his eyes directly. Hidan screamed in pain as the boy ruthlessly ripped through his mind, teaching him everything he could about their god, their cult, their religion, and their abilities. The boy's strength caused Hidan to be appalled. He was a real monster. A real god. With an odd expression on his face, Naruto severed the mental connection after a few minutes. When he saw the men trembling in front of him, he had to admit that they were somewhat immortal. His dark chakra has the power to kill them by destroying their bodies from the inside out. However, he couldn't help but feel a bond with their power. Like his own power, it was violent, twisted, and dark. He could not disregard their abilities in these times, even though these Jashinists were merely barbarians. Hidan begged, "Please, spare us. We won't attack anymore," and several of his trembling allies repeated the plea. Naruto smirked and said, "And why would I do that?" When Hidan saw the boy's vicious eyes, a shiver went down his spine. He truly intended to brutally murder them all. His own comrades, who had witnessed everything, looked at him in fear. Hidan couldn't help but feel something else, even though this was it. Despite the powers that Jashin-sama had given them, this boy was stronger than the rest of his group and beat them like tiny insects. Could he be Jashin? Yes, he might be Jashin based on his evil eyes, bloodlust, cruelty, and twisted laugh. It was unbelievable to him that their lord was in front of them and that none of them had even recognized him. "Oi, assholes." Hidan gave him a brief glance before turning to face the frightened stares of his cult, which Naruto watched with interest. Before Hidan began speaking in their cult's ancient language, Naruto noticed the expression in his eyes. These men were unaware that Naruto had already mastered the fundamentals and could comprehend Hidan's meaning. Nevertheless, he found the man's dishonesty annoying. As the dark chakra tendrils encircling Hidan's body sliced off the man's arms entirely, he clenched his fists. Hidan let out a scream. "You basta!" Hidan was about to curse the boy when the youngster gave him a cold look, but he stopped himself in time. "You say something?" Naruto questioned ruthlessly. Hidan shook his head angrily. Hidan whimpered as Naruto said menacingly, "I don't like people who avoid me in any way. You understand me?" "Yes, my lord." When one of their own spoke such blasphemy, the Jashinists gasped in shock. They directed their enraged gazes at their comrade, who returned the look. He's a god, you fools. Can't you feel his power? It's just like Jashin-sama. Have you forgotten our scriptures? Shouted Hidan with rage. Naruto simply arched an eyebrow, fascinated by what was taking place before him. As the cult members gazed into the boy's eyes, he couldn't help but feel a great sense of satisfaction for the chaos he was creating. With a thousandfold increase, they witnessed the same craziness, bloodlust, and rage. As Hidan's words took hold, their eyes grew wide. The chakra that is dark. The dark arts that the great Jashin taught their cult were the source of their own abilities. All of them had been crushed like tiny insects by this boy, who was a total master of the dark arts. They sensed his power and aura, and it never stopped. When Naruto finally asked, "Ready to die?" the entire cult was startled out of their reverie. In a terrified tone, Hidan exclaimed, "What? No, don't kill us." "Why?" inquired Naruto in a disinterested tone. Hidan uttered the desperate words, We will fight for you, die for you, do anything for you," and Naruto noticed that the other cult members shared this sentiment. He repeated, "Why?" and this time he was appalled by the fervent expression in Hidan's eyes. "Because you're Jashin-sama reincarnated in the flesh. I never thought I would see this day, to witness your dark powers. Let us serve you, my lord," asked Hidan. The whole cult held their breath in terror as Naruto raised his hand. Since these rodents were monsters in human form, he had to muster all of his willpower to refrain from killing them right here. They were no longer human. He had witnessed the atrocities they had committed and sensed their malevolent impulses. On the other hand, he recognized their value. To him they were merely pawns, but nonetheless useful, cannon fodder. All of the cult members were thrown to their knees, and their masks broke instantly. As the twisted energy consumed their bodies and the dark tendrils disappeared, they experienced an odd euphoria. They experienced ecstatic power. They all bowed their heads to the ground, which did not surprise Naruto, who had stepped forward. He pointed his hands in the direction of the crowd after performing a series of intricate hand seals. When a tiny bit of the dark energy sank inside their bodies, they all hissed in pain. On their right arm, a huge skull-faced tattoo appeared, its eyes briefly glimmering a demon red before going out. He saw the outcome of the small ritual he had carried out when they gazed at Naruto. Every cult member now had at least one dark red eye, similar to Naruto's. To Hidan's surprise, the lost organ was replaced almost immediately while he was regenerating his lost eye. He bowed deeply before his lord, gazing at him in wonder. Hidan yelled, "Master, thank you for giving us your power," as the others imitated him. Naruto stared at these men, his face expressionless. Though it didn't improve their fighting abilities, he had given them a small portion of his chakra, which made their feeble bodies a bit more resilient. The most significant thing, though, was that they were all now fervently devoted to him. His will was their will. In the minds of these insane fighters, he had ensured this fact by posing as the avatar of Jashin. Naruto commanded, "Rise." His new pawns obeyed his command without hesitation, which gave him great satisfaction. Despite their contributions to his cause, each of them would still be held accountable for their crimes. This way, at least, these miserable people would be putting their deranged abilities to good use. "From today, you shall follow me. Together we shall strike this twisted world," said Naruto. They all joyfully replied, "Yes, master. Obey me and I promise to reward you great battles and bloodshed. Fight for me, kill for me, do anything I say and you shall realize the reason for your existence," declared Naruto. Hidan fervently declared, "We will do all you ask, master," because he had personally witnessed it. The boy was Jashin's avatar, and the vision he gave them was enough to make all the cultists dance with delight. Oh, the destruction they would bring about. When Naruto glared at them all, he snapped out of his crazed thoughts. Naruto held up his hand and said, "Loyalty will be rewarded. Treachery will only bring you a tortuous death." The skull mark on their arms burned their skin and bodies, causing all of the men to fall to their knees and scream in agony. When Hidan looked at his master, he saw that their leader had applied his seal to each of them. Their leader's power was demonstrated by a fuinjutsu that none of them had ever seen before. "This mark is my connection to each of you. I'll issue my orders to all of you through them," told Naruto. "Yes, master. We understand," Hidan said appreciatively as their leader put an end to the excruciating pain the mark was causing them. Naruto gazed intently into each of their eyes, peering directly into their souls. He didn't take a step back and speak loudly until he was certain of their steadfast devotion. Naruto ordered, "Let our holy crusade begin." When his new followers howled excitedly, he couldn't help but smile. His heart no longer felt the loss because he now had more resources to carry out his vision, beginning right now. Naruto was told to divide yourself in groups of 10. The men split up into 4 columns of 10 men each and obeyed without question. Naruto strolled around them, examining each one. "Tell me your names." When their master asked for their names, the men were ecstatic. Naruto could only grin at their folly as a result of their eager smiles. Guro, Haru, Isamu, Jun, Ken, Ko, Fumio, Keiji. He listened patiently as the men gave him their names, though it took a few minutes. As he completed the routine task, he tried his best to conceal his disinterest. He saw these people as nothing more than pawns, but if he wanted to use them, he needed to know them. Good. Jun, led Team 1. Your mission is to set up bases for our army. Find remote places for this task. I give you 3 months. Isamu, led Team 2. Your mission is to gather armor, weapons and arsenal for my followers. I don't care how you get them, you have 2 months. Ko, led Team 3. Your mission is to get me the money for our crusade. You will regularly report back to me with the progress you've made. And Hidan, led Team 4. Your mission is to gather information over the 5 great villages. You are free to kill any of their shinobi who get in your way and collect their bounties. Send them to Ko afterwards. Understood? Naruto was serious. Hidan laughed and said, "Yes, master. I'll make many sacrifices in your glory." Naruto continued to stare at each of them with a detached, icy expression. Failure will not be tolerated. Except for Hidan and his team, the rest of you are to carry out your missions without attracting any attention. If I find that you have disobeyed me in any manner, then I'll make your fate worse than death. Naruto promised, which caused them all to tremble with dread. Yes, master. They all said simultaneously. He dismissed it with a wave of his hand. Go and carry out my will across this world. As his fervent pawns scattered swiftly to fulfill his commands, Naruto couldn't help but smile sinisterly. Slowly but surely, he was bringing about the revolution he had dreamed of, first with Kisame and now with these men. He felt that one day his dark abilities would be the cause of a change in the world, even though they were the curse of his life. He would move slowly and with patience. Like a serpent, he would strike his chosen enemies in a flash and destroy them in a carefully laid trap. He began his journey back towards the village of Han with those thoughts in mind. He couldn't leave them in such a state because there might still be civilians buried beneath the debris and possibly children hurt. In order to prevent the AIM ninja from finding a village half full of corpses, he would provide them with temporary assistance long enough for them to live. Then he would be gone. Unfortunately, his wish was not granted because he came to a complete stop. His evil crimson eyes turned back to their original blue hue. He stopped, and his dark chakra disappeared. His eyes went wide with surprise. Because Nagato and Akeno were the ones standing at the village's entrance, along with Konan. Naruto blinked. His best friends and Konan all looked at him with different looks in their eyes, making it easy to see how shocked he was. To put it mildly, Konan appeared irritated, Nagato was let down, and Akeno was. As Akeno charged at him, he had just a few valuable seconds to deliver his tanto. Her eyes were screaming murder in blood. Akeno screamed, "You bastard," and clashed with the startled boy with her own tanto. As their weapons came into contact, Naruto witnessed sparks flying. Even more shocking to him was the fact that Konan was observing the two with a puzzled smile on her face, and Nagato did nothing to stop their furious female friend. The bitch was taking pleasure in his suffering. While the Uzumaki girl swore a litany of derogatory terms at him, he successfully deflected Akeno's non-lethal blows. She silently accepted her rage, acknowledging that he did deserve all of them for leaving without even saying goodbye, since he had gone too far this time. In addition, his Azukage had cautioned him against upsetting his clan's females when they were very enraged. She disarmed him with a swift blow, his tanto slipping from his grasp and rolling away from him, costing him his brief distraction. Her tanto had already torn through his shirt and was now protruding his chest, causing him to see her flinch. Even though she dropped the weapon right away to prevent his skin from being cut by the jagged tanto, he still flinched and lowered his head due to the unending rage in her eyes. He was speechless. He braced himself for the slap or punch that would come at him at any moment. He just stayed motionless, prepared to take the penalty for hurting her. "You reckless idiot." All he heard was that, and then he felt a fierce embrace, the soft arms encircling his back and drawing him nearer to their own soft body. When he smelled her, his eyes opened and he saw that she was embracing him. His heart was broken by the sound of her gentle sobs. If that wasn't enough, for a person like him, she was crying. Why? He glanced at Nagato and noticed that Conan was grinning at his friend as he let out a sigh and shook his head wearily. It was a sincere smile, not one of derision. He started crying when he saw that smile, Akino's sobs, and Nagato's smirk. He hadn't seen them. I really missed them. He wanted time to pause, if only for a few seconds. To simply live with his friends, to be free of his troubles, to be free of his big dream, to be free of his suffering. When Naruto put his own arms around her waist and drew her closer, Akino grinned tearfully. Her long silver hair brushed against his own moist tears as she felt him press his face against the side of her neck. He was crying, and she couldn't help but be shocked. She had only anticipated his icy stare and his firm orders to keep away, but she never thought he would get so emotional when he saw her and Nagato. At that moment, she remembered what Nagato had said. He cares about you, Akino, more than you could ever imagine. Her tears stopped, and a tiny smile appeared on her lips. Even though she was still furious with him, she felt uncomfortable embracing him. Even though they had only been apart for 2 days, it felt like years to her. She was just that devoted to him and Nagato. When the quiet was broken by a slight cough, her joy was short-lived. Akino gritted her teeth as she felt Naruto gradually break the embrace, ending the cozy feeling between them, and caught a glimpse of Conan looking at them curiously out of the corner of her eye. She noticed that Naruto was once again observing the aim kunoichi with caution. Conan said in a bewildered tone, "If you two are done snogging each other, there are much more important tasks to finish." Although her tone was sarcastic, it still caused Akino to give her a murderous glare, which the aim girl blatantly ignored. While awkwardly staring at Nagato for assistance, Naruto discovered that his friend was silently whistling to himself and looking the other way. What a bastard. After gathering his thoughts, he turned to face Conan with a serious expression, which caused the girl to stop smiling and take on a similar expression. "How did you find me?" Naruto inquired indifferently. When Naruto swore silently, Conan grinned and said, "We were following your trail, although it was not as easy task I had imagined in the beginning. We received a distress call forwarded to us from headquarters indicating an imminent attack on this village. Finding you here was a surprise." Akino grinned as Naruto muttered, "Damn my saving people thing." The next instant, Naruto was seized by the shoulders and confronted by an enraged Akino, who began yelling at him non-stop and shaking him like a rag doll. Naruto couldn't help but smile in spite of this. That was what he loved. Akino would always be Akino. He stopped himself suddenly. He looked at the attractive girl shouting at him in the same worried voice he had known for years, and the strange thought that had briefly crossed his mind was enough to startle him, and he noticed something different for the first time. Her soft lips, the way her cheeks turned red as she screamed at him, the way that obnoxious silver hair fell over her face, pleading with him to put it back. He cursed to himself, "Stop, stop. This is Akino. Just stop." He tried to stop these annoying thoughts, but he couldn't help but think about how much he had missed her. He had missed Nagato, too, even though they had only been apart for 2 days, but not as much as he had missed her. He had missed her sardonic comments, her smile, her admirable ability to listen to nearly everything he had to say, and much more. He felt the urge to touch her cheek to make sure she was real and not a trick, but his hands betrayed him as they gradually began to rise. However, they came to a halt in the middle of their journey when he realized his plans and his actions with the cult. When Naruto's hands fell back, Nagato, who had been closely observing his male best friend, couldn't help but sigh. The girl totally missed Naruto's strange reaction because Akano was too busy screaming at him. It was nearly. With a resigned sigh, Naruto thought, "Darkness and light can't coexist together, Akano. One day you'll realize it too." Akano had stopped yelling and was now panting heavily to catch her breath, so his internal conflict must have lasted longer than he had anticipated. With her piercing gaze piercing his soul, Akano asked sharply, "Did you even listen to a single thing I said?" "Yes." He lied with ease. Akano ignored his obvious deception and asked, "What do you have to say in return?" "Nothing." His thoughtless response caused Akino's nostrils to flare, but before she could respond, he brushed past her and headed directly for Conan. She stood where she was, staring at him as he extended his hand to Conan, who immediately shook it. Naruto calmly said, "Uzumaki Naruto, I think introductions were left unattended in our last encounter," and she nodded. Conan calmly answered, "Conan, and likewise." It's quite interesting to meet someone with your talents. She hadn't overlooked the boy's purposeful rejection of his worried female best friend. Although Akeno could have been a bit more composed, Naruto's treatment of his own friend did not particularly impress Konan. The fact that he did it on purpose annoyed her. Naruto said bluntly, "I want you to take my friends back to the capital." Konan asked sharply, "First tell me what happened to the bandits." "Oh, is that how it is? Well, then better for me." Naruto thought wryly, pleased to confirm her suspicion that the attackers were not a cult of immortal fighters but simply bandits. "I chased them off," Naruto said bluntly. Even though she hadn't known him for long, she had a suspicion that he wasn't the kind of ninja who took prisoners, so she asked Konan suspiciously, "You didn't kill them?" Her doubts were confirmed by the shocked expressions on his friends' faces. This boy never took prisoners, but instead of killing the attackers, he had only chased them away. Disgustingly, Naruto uttered, "I don't want to stain my hands with trash." He challenged Konan and his own friends to refute his testimony by giving them stern looks to end the conversation. He couldn't help but smile when his friends gave in and gave Konan a slight nod, which caused the girl to sigh. However, it was clear from the AIM girl's eyes that she didn't trust him or his friends. The girl grinned again when Naruto cryptically said, "I get the feeling you're not the type of person who'll follow an unknown boy for 2 days without a strong reason." Konan shrugged, "I don't know, maybe I was bored." Nagato laughed, which immediately drew Naruto's ominous glare. Naruto hissed, "Get to the point, Konan." She hesitated. His tone was icy, and it was clear that he was annoyed with her. To put it mildly, it felt odd because it was the first time she had heard him call her name. Although she didn't think he chased off the bandits like his friends did, she had some theories about what this boy might be up to. However, there were more pressing issues to deal with right now, and he did save her people so she could overlook it for the time being. She stared the red-haired boy in the eye, steeling herself and mustering all her courage and determination. "I have a proposal for you, Uzumaki Naruto." The door was knocked on curtly. Kushina Uzumaki sighed deeply and strode to her apartment's door. However, she was stuck in place when she opened the door. Because the man who used to be the center of her universe, the father of her son, and the love of her life were standing in front of her. Even after everything that had transpired between them, she was still shocked to see Minato gaze at her with the same tenderness and affection today. "Can I come in?" Minato asked courteously. After her initial astonishment subsided, she glared back at him with a cold expression. Minato was taken aback when he recognized the source of his son's icy stare. No, he tried not to show how disappointed and hurt he was by her sour response. Seeing her in this state and growing more and more distant from him broke his heart every day, regardless of what he did or how hard he tried. She watched him search for something in his pockets while he swallowed heavily. A few seconds later, he produced a small envelope and handed it to her. "I don't want it," Kushina stated bluntly. "Kushina." She stopped when Kushina growled, "How many times do I have to tell you? It's over. You can stop pretending." This time, she didn't miss his heartbroken gaze. His blue eyes are damned. Minato hesitantly said, "I know you can never forgive me, but I wanted to give you this before I leave." "Leave?" Kushina asked, a wistful smile spreading across his face as a frown marred her lovely face. "For war." She stopped. She looked for any indications of dishonesty in his eyes, but she only saw the truth, and the rage and resentment disappeared, to be replaced by a sudden fear and anxiety. He really was going to war. Obito is going as well. The final piece of information crushed her, as if Minato's departure wasn't enough. Obi was too young to be subjected to the atrocities of war, so it was wrong. No one, not even Minato, deserved that. She wanted to argue, but she was aware that nearly all of the skilled ninjas were being sent to fight. She had to stay behind to protect the village because she was the Jinchuriki, and she would only be sent to the battlefield in extreme situations. Seeing all of her loved ones take these risks while she did was infuriating. "I want you to take this, so that at least when I die, I know I haven't always lived up to your expectations, Kushina, but I still wish the best for you." Hearing those horrible words made Kushina's heart tighten in her chest, but he just grinned. "I will know that I at least fulfilled our agreement." Unable to control the tears that welled up in her eyes, she closed them. As she recalled everything, the lump in her throat became so heavy that her heart nearly stopped. "I'll always love you, Kushina." She was so shocked by what he had just said that she opened her eyes in tears right away. But the only things that remained were the single tear that had fallen from Minato's own eye and the gentle breeze that signaled his departure. She turned her eyes to the envelope he had given her, heartbroken. Her heart stopped when she slowly opened the envelope and spilled its contents. There were almost a dozen pictures of her beloved son in front of this. The image of that little child, her child, was brushed through by Kushina's shaking fingers. She felt at ease just looking at this fabricated representation of him. It was like seeing a piece of her son. As she looked through them all, she saw that they showed Naruto with a few people his own age as well as at various ages. Perhaps his teammates or classmates. It filled her with joy. That idiot. It was unbelievable to her. Minato would have to observe their young son from a distance, even for a short while, in order to have such pictures of him. She couldn't leave Konoha without sending the whole village into a terrible panic. She had a seal applied by the Hokage that continuously updated the old man on her location. There were also detection seals in Uzu that would have picked up Minato's presence. However, the father with the blonde hair had put everything on the line to see their son and make sure he was safe. To see him develop, even if only for a brief while. Before having to leave. She became enraged with him for keeping this information from her. But she knew in her heart that she would have insisted he allow her to go with him if he had disclosed that he was secretly going to see Uzu, even if it was just for a short while. And everything would have been ruined by that. Nevertheless, he had now bestowed upon her these priceless recollections of their son. A tiny, nostalgic smile came to her lips. Perhaps, deep down, she still loved the boy she had once loved. She was relieved to see Minato's commitment to and love for his son, as well as his unwavering love for her despite everything that had happened in their lives. With the photographs firmly grasped in her other hand, Kushina thought angrily, clenching her fist near her heart, "Minato Namikaze, you crazy bastard." However, it could only mean that he broke the treaty between Konoha and Uzu if he had given this to her. Minato didn't believe he would survive. Kushina was unable to envision her life without Minato for the first time in years. She took off running. Konan fixed her intense gaze on the boy seated before her. She chose to explain her plan after they had ensured the safety of the Han villagers and treated the injured, and Naruto had the patience to grant her request. She had to acknowledge that Akeno was a very skilled medical professional who had proven her abilities by promptly curing even the most severe wounds. Nagato assisted the rescue crews in searching the area for any additional enemy forces while gradually erecting protection seals around the village. It was established that Han would be more difficult to attack the next time with him in the lead. Hanzo had been correct. Despite being a crazy group, these Uzumaki were undoubtedly talented, and she could see how beneficial their addition would be to a developing country like AIM. She was now standing in a small house belonging to one of Han's residents, where she might have seen the strongest Uzumaki she had ever seen. His sparkling eyes were staring back at her with a hint of amusement, which captivated her. No question existed in her mind that Naruto Uzumaki was a jerk. However, the boy also had a different side that he hardly ever displayed to anyone. Naruto finally lost patience and ordered, "Well, talk," which caused her to grin. The boy scowled as he stared back at her when Konan said, "You have interesting powers, lethal but useful. We could use a ninja of your talents." "I already said it clearly. I won't swear loyalty to any nation or leader. I am Uzu's soldier, and will remain so till my last breath," said Naruto obstinately. Galatea was right. "His pride is what sets him apart from others, but it is also his weakness," whispered Konan. He was relieved when his frown vanished and he raised an eyebrow in interest. "Then let me rephrase it. We don't want you to become an AIM shinobi, nor swear loyalty to Hanzo or our nation. But you are loyal to your clan, and with a world war at our doorstep, AIM is just not prepared enough to face the dangers. That is why we need your services," Konan said neutrally. With a wry smile spreading across his face, Naruto sneered, "A mercenary? What makes you think I'm a thug for hire?" As he gazed back at her, the bastard's eyes even began to sparkle. Konan inhaled deeply. She would succeed even though he was a challenging individual to deal with, whatever the case. "Not as a mercenary, but as a protector of the Uzumaki clan. You have seen our shinobi and their skill level. Despite the talents of your friends, AIM does not have the numbers or skills to oppose any of the Great Five from attacking our lands or using AIM as their battlefield. If that happens, neither my people or your friends and the Uzumaki children can live peacefully, so I want you to be a guardian." In that moment, Konan realized she had touched his heart. She was able to see it. As he considered his people, his once derisive smile vanished and his puzzled eyes changed to one that was incredibly tender and loving. No matter how much of a jerk he was, Konan couldn't help but smile because she couldn't help but think that maybe this boy cared more about the Uzumaki than anyone else in the world. He was admirable to her because of his devotion and belief in himself. His abilities were just one more advantage. "We don't need your loyalty, or for you to become our ninja." You are free to go wherever you like and do whatever you want as long as it doesn't harm AIM or its people, but I'm sure you won't do any such thing now that the Uzumaki or our people are as well," Conan said softly. He gave her a somewhat surprised look when she referred to the Uzumaki as her own people. Her eyes betrayed that she was just as shocked as he was. She was astonished when he leaned back in his chair and smiled at her patiently, causing her heart to race with an emotion she couldn't quite place. Without a word, Naruto questioned, "What do you want exactly?" Happily, Conan thought, he's not an unreasonable person it seems, just a little stubborn. He nodded in agreement with his friend's decisions as Conan enthusiastically explained. Hanzo-sama is forming a special group of ninjas. These men and women will play a vital role in protecting AIM from all external strikes from any ninja village, even the Great Five. It's an elite group that will work in small teams. Akeno and Nagato have already agreed to be a part of it. Naruto inquired, "Are you a member as well?" "Yes," she said with pride. She felt a little uneasy and anxious because he didn't say anything for the next few minutes. Naruto Uzumaki was hard to predict, even though she had laid her cards out in front of him. After a pause, Naruto said, "So you want my services till this war ends?" "Yes, we'll notify you when there is a mission. Until then, you are free to stay with us or do your own tasks. You will be a member of the Uzumaki clan and not an AIM shinobi. We will also provide you a handsome compensation for your services, along with a house to stay in AIM and cover all your expenses until you are a part of this group," enthusiastically replied Conan. Her enthusiasm for this new group of ninjas caused her to explain the details with pride and speed, so she took a breath to gather herself. Although it was good, she needed to explain the main point with patience and precision. "And we can help you learn how to control your dark power." Naruto hissed, "What?" and recoiled when she saw the intensity in those eyes return. He appeared to be just as wary of his abilities as those around him. "Galatea, my teacher has a unique set of skills that allows her to manipulate another person's chakra. I also have that talent. That was why you weren't able to hit me so easily with your dark attacks. You didn't miss your target, rather I made your attacks miss me," said Conan with candor. Naruto stated bluntly, "I don't believe you, because it was just not possible." He had scarcely encountered or even heard of any ninja possessing the ability to control or even manipulate another ninja's chakra, despite the fact that there were many different types of shinobi with distinctive Kekkei Genkai. In response to Conan's challenging gaze, he immediately charged a tiny bit of his dark power. Because of his almost flawless chakra control, a tiny, dark ball composed of dark chakra formed in his hand. This was the pinnacle of energy manipulation. He hurled it directly at the girl, who was now grinning, without hesitation. When Conan stayed in her chair and let the attack come within 2 inches of her face, he almost lost his cool. The dark ball of chakra then abruptly moved away from her side without making contact with her. She immediately returned the attack, causing Naruto's eyes to widen before he could calm down. He raised his hand in self-defense, but she merely stopped the chakra ball, and Naruto swiftly used up the energy again. "Proof enough." Conan smirked and asked. He simply looked at her incredulously. He now realized how she was able to keep up with him, manage thousands of paper attacks, and even use her paper wings to fly. Up until now, the only person who had mastered flying was the Tsuchikage, a legendary warrior. At such a young age, this girl was able to accomplish the same feat. Respectfully, Naruto rolled her eyes at him and said, "You're talented." Conan cheerfully said, "Thank you, Captain Obvious," and he smiled a little as a result. "Look, I understand that you have your own plans and are a proud Uzumaki, but we need your help, and we won't stop you from pursuing your dreams and even help you as far as possible. Hanzo-sama respects you, and if you agree to this proposal, then you can visit your friends, your clan, even stay with them whenever you want," Conan said with a sincere grin. Naruto argued, "Or I can just sneak in and meet them." Conan instantly stopped smiling when he was asked, "Yeah, and get them in legal trouble for allowing a non-citizen ninja to roam around our lands knowingly?" "I see. What shall it be, Naruto?" He fell silent. To put it mildly, the offer was very reasonable. He was aware that, in spite of Conan's well-chosen words, he would be obliquely shielding AIM from other villages, but he wouldn't mind if it meant his friends would be safe. He was also the one who started the conflict between Konoha and Suna because he couldn't bear to live if those two powerful villages attacked this tiny country without cause or used AIM as their battlefield. Additionally, he required time to form the Akatsuki, his own private organization that he intended to use to revolutionize the world. But he had nowhere else to go, and it would take time. He would sooner die than spend more time with the members of the cult than was necessary. Their vile souls made him want to murder them, but he would first use them before putting an end to their wretched lives. Additionally, with their expertise in barriers and sealing, he could assist Nagato in keeping AIM isolated from the outside world. Most importantly, he would have more time to spend with his friends, alongside Nagato, Akeno, and the Uzumaki kids. He was free to leave AIM covertly for his other missions, which was a much-needed bonus. He wasn't sure why, but that thought calmed his troubled heart. In addition to the resources he would get in Hanzo's trust, he could use AIM as his covert hideout without endangering his friends. He turned to look at Conan, who was grinning at him. He found the girl odd and fascinating, and the fact that she could somewhat equalize his abilities was both menacing and serene. If she could help him control his dark powers, he wouldn't have to worry about losing control and doing something he would later regret. He had little hope and it was almost impossible, but if he could somehow master his abilities with Conan and Galatea's assistance, and he could depart in peace after this war storm passed, once he was certain his friends were safe and AIM was fully protected. When he inhaled deeply and closed his eyes, Conan couldn't help but stare hesitantly. When he nodded in agreement and asked a question, a smile appeared on her lovely face. Naruto asked inquisitively, "What is this group called?" The girl's smile was so contagious that it caused him to relax a bit. "Domino Squad." A little boy heard the steady but gentle knocks on his door and let out a lazy yawn. He felt the first blast of cold air hit his nearly nude body as he slipped out of bed. The first thought that entered his head was that he detested AIM, the weather, and most of all, the constant rain. He had given it a lot of thought, and despite how difficult it was to acknowledge, he couldn't deny that the climate in Omegacure was 1,000 times worse than that of Fire Nation, an oppressive power, and even his beloved Uzu. Although it was severe, he honestly had no loyalty to this country or its citizens. In addition to achieving a few of his own covert goals, he was performing this work to protect his friends and clan. Then he was finished. If he had to remain here for longer than a few weeks, Kami would assist him. With these thoughts in mind, a sour Naruto Uzumaki slammed his room door, expecting to see another of the obnoxious servants Hanzo had supplied. The leader of AIM was going to be quite surprised if the elderly man didn't believe that Naruto knew exactly what game he was playing. In any case, the roles were reversed when he discovered Conan at his door rather than another unnamed servant. It's absurd to call someone the angel. As she gazed at him, Conan raised one eyebrow. Naruto didn't really care that he was only wearing his boxers when he looked down. Naruto casually asked, "Like what you see?" and she just shrugged her shoulders. "I've seen better." When she saw his eyebrows twitch, even slightly, she had to force herself not to smirk. Naruto had requested to be left alone for a while after they had returned him to the capital 2 days prior. A request that, up until now, Hanzo had granted. Unsurprised, Conan sighed and said bluntly, "I have been asked to give you a tour of the capital." Naruto boldly said, "I'll pass." This girl was intriguing but dangerous. In addition to feeling a little uneasy when she looked at him, he had already seen enough evidence of that. Sometimes it seemed as though she could see right through his lies, which alarmed him. The worst thing about her was that, in contrast to Akeno, Conan just didn't give a fucking shit. As long as he didn't obstruct her or do anything that would endanger her country, she didn't press and just let him be. Her next words were evidence of this habit. With a stoic expression and no sign of annoyance or anger, she said, "Suit yourself. I'll inform Hanzo that you are not feeling well, like the last 2 days." Conan turned and began to leave without another word or suggestion. She stopped when Naruto asked her inquisitively, "Where are my friends?" But she didn't turn back to him. "Akeno is helping the older children of your clan find new accommodations. She's also very busy scanning through the list of decent families who have applied to adopt many of your younger clan children. Hanzo-sama has given her full authority to decide whether any of the families are suitable for this task or not," explained Conan. From the corner of her eye she could clearly see him frowning. He acknowledged, and she nodded, "I don't trust your people, even the civilians, not yet." Conan didn't miss the bitterness in her voice as she stated bluntly, "Understandable, but the young children need a home and a stable environment to grow which only a family can provide. It is either that or the orphanage, and trust me you don't want that option." As his eyes briefly met hers, there was a pause in the lengthy hallway, and he was aware of. Silently, Naruto said, "You were an orphan, weren't you?" in a tone that was neither sympathetic nor caring. He had discovered that he detested those who felt sorry for him because he had been in a similar predicament to her all of his life. There was no other option. Life was dreary. Either you accept it and work to improve it, or you continue to weep in an attempt to win sympathy. He got a vague idea of who Conan was from the two possibilities by looking into her eyes. Yes, was Conan's flat response. He honestly remarked, "You rose pretty high. Must have been quite a journey." And noticed a tiny smile appear on her lips. She looked really lovely as a result. She looked him in the eye and said, "I could say the same about you." He let out a tiny breath, had a wry thought, and turned to face her again, only to see her waiting. She gave Naruto a questioning glance when he said, "How about having some coffee?" Conan laughed and said, "Coffee? So early in the morning?" But all he did was shrug, a tiny smile spreading across his lips. Naruto casually retorted, "Perhaps after a cup of coffee, I'll be a bit less grumpy." She gave a snort. "All right," Conan said bluntly, "but I tell you it won't be inexpensive." "Whatever you say. After all you're buying." He winked mischievously and slammed the door. When she saw his bluntness, Conan stayed put, her face showing a noticeable look of surprise. She had to give the boy credit for having courage. However, a total jerk at the same time. Nevertheless, she couldn't resist letting a little laugh slip out of her mouth. With his trained eyes scanning the surroundings, Naruto strolled through the streets of Aim's capital. People would always be drowned in floods if it weren't for the flawless drainage lines on the sidewalks, which efficiently carried all the continuous rainfall. The tallest buildings in the world were the enormous towers surrounding him where people once resided. Evidence of Aim's increasing technological and industrialization. If he could only put Aim at the top in a few years and his clansmen in charge of this country, the other great nations would have resources but not the technology. Since he would assist his clan in capturing Aim, he wouldn't have to start over and recreate Yuzu. With ninjas like Conan and Galatea protecting this tiny country, or with Hanzo and the samurai in charge, it would not be simple. However, the military would be forced to designate his friend as the next leader if he could somehow convince the Aim people that Nagato is a leader. Nagato was strong and only required a gentle prod. Naruto would be happy to provide one. As a torrent of rain swept over him, he shivered and noticed Conan grinning at him from his side. Because she had been using her chakra manipulation to prevent them both from getting wet from the constant rain, she was completely dry. That is, until he eventually lost himself in his own world and stopped paying any attention to her. By forcing him to soak in the rain, she made her point very evident. "Earth calling?" Conan asked wryly, giving her a snarling look. "You." With a tone of authority, she stated, "Since I'm the one buying you coffee and giving you the tour, I expect to be listened to." With a smile spreading across his lips, Naruto flicked his fingers and asked, "Is that so?" As the street's stagnant water rose from all sides and poured down on an astonished Conan, he hurried to get out of the way. Conan was completely soaked by the time it was over. When they saw their beloved angel soaked like that, the onlookers' faces displayed a range of emotions, from amusement to annoyance to outright anger. Naruto couldn't contain his laughter when he saw the expression on her face. A tense moment ensued as she gave him a laughing look, and for some reason, that laugh caused her to smile, which in turn caused her to laugh joyfully. The surrounding shinobi and civilians relaxed, and some even smiled joyfully when they saw their angel laughing so joyfully. For many of the women, the moment only got sweeter when they watched the red-haired boy pick up an umbrella and walk next to Conan. When the girl looked up, she saw a dark umbrella shielding her from the rain that had stopped. She turned to see Naruto holding the umbrella and grinning slightly apologetically. Naruto whispered, "Sorry for getting you wet," as his choice of words caused her cheeks to slightly flush. "Shameless," Conan said, her voice free of any hint of irritation. Was there a trace of approval in her voice, too, Naruto? She gave him a stern look and said, "I try my best. Now I think we should move, we've given enough a show to the people." "Oh, you scared?" Conan whispered, and I saw him give her a questioning look. Naruto was teased, "Didn't know you were an exhibitionist." She moved closer until her lips were only an inch from his, and he tensed. Their combined body heats provided the only defense against Aim's frigid weather, and he felt his heart beat a little quicker. He found himself melting in those brilliant orbs of hers, and the world around him vanished when he saw the look in her eyes. "I am lot of things, Uzumaki Naruto." He must have been in a deep trance because he didn't realize she had walked ahead until the chilly rain struck him once more, in addition to his umbrella. He felt a weird sensation in his chest when he saw her smile triumphantly back at him. Despite being soaked from the rain, he kept his gaze fixed on her eyes. And he only succeeded in ending this peculiar moment between him and Conan when he caught a glimpse of the sizable crowd that had gathered to watch them. A few of the younger men were glaring at him, and he had to fight hard to hide his blush when he saw so many women look at him adorably. With only one thing in mind, he ran after her while shaking his head. He was going crazy over Aim. They both sat down in one of the capital's more well-known cafes. The automated machine at the entrance that assisted in drying the people actually caught Naruto off guard. They called it a dryer or something, and while ninjas could easily dry themselves, this device would be a godsend for civilians who live in areas that are constantly raining. He was unable to stop thinking about some intriguing concepts that came to him. AIM had the manpower and technology, if nothing else, to start a new revolution. But that was for later. He needed some coffee first. He found one of the new things he liked about AIM as he drank from the mug, aside from their increasing technological and industrialization. Like it? Conan inquired, a smirk clearly visible on her lips. As she drank her own hot tea, she nodded in agreement with Naruto's neutral response, "It'll do." Naruto asked earnestly, "So, when are we starting this special group you talked about?" He would soon be receiving updates from his minions and possibly Kisame. He needed to properly plan and organize in order to micromanage two factions. By the end of this week, it takes time to scan through the list of potential recruits, gather the resources and establish the command structure, Conan bluntly stated. Fair enough. Hopefully, the ninjas would have prior training and mission experiences. Otherwise, our missions would only be more difficult if we are forced to carry young rookies. Clarified Naruto, causing her to sigh. Conan sighed, but he nodded in agreement as he responded, "I understand your point. But AIM only has a limited military force, and the few who are powerful have been assigned various important tasks. We'll try to get the best, but you'll just have to work with who's available." "What kind of training have you gone through so far? Since you were working with us, we'll need to know your skill set and past experience," she continued. She deserves praise for not recoiling when his eyes hardened and he looked into her eyes for any hint of betrayal or hidden agenda. To her relief, the moment lasted for a long time before he finally leaned back a little when he was satisfied. Without showing any emotion, he replied, "Espionage, assassinations, infiltration, tracking, interrogation. You seem too young for many of these tasks, but after seeing what you did during our first battle, making sure your people survived in enemy territory for months, I believe you have been trained from early age. Possibly to be inducted into some special forces program Uzu must have or was creating," suggested Conan, which somewhat surprised him. She had a keen mind. She nodded as he responded, his words tinged with resentment, "Yes. I was planned to be recruited in the special forces once my training was over, the rest you know." Conan inquired inquisitively, "Your friends say you never take prisoners during a mission? Is that true?" "Unless I'm ordered to or the target has incredible value. No, there is no point in spending resources and manpower after someone who would slice your neck the very first chance they get," he said openly. Conan gave him a serious look and hinted, "I'll take your word for it. Hopefully, you'll be complacent enough to take prisoners if AIM or the mission demands for it. I may not be loyal to this nation, but I respect a contract, and I would not to do anything that may harm my friends and clan. I'm sure you must have considered that before you offered me this deal," slyly replied Naruto. "We did," she admitted. They sipped their tea and coffee, respectively, and remained silent for a long time, perhaps reviewing what they had just told one another. Staring at her, Naruto said, "Tell me about yourself." Conan didn't miss the tinge of pride in her voice as she answered, "Nothing special. I was an orphan. My parents were ninjas who died during the previous war. Spent most of my life in the orphanage until Hanzo noticed me and recruited me into his service. He must have seen something special in you to do such a thing personally. He doesn't seem like the type of man who'll go for anything but the best," suggested Naruto, which made her laugh. "I understand why Hanzo-sama was interested in you. You remind him of himself when he was younger, Uzumaki Naruto. Intelligent, strong, devoted, and a ninja with a change-oriented vision. Even though we may not be your country or people, know that Salamander Hanzo finds something unique in you." Conan arched one eyebrow in surprise and said, "Don't let it go to waste. Even though you appear to be very loyal to Hanzo, I'll keep that in mind," Naruto said. "You treat him like family." She blinked, then a smile appeared on her lips as she remembered the man who had improved her life. "Yes." When she noticed him looking directly into the shop's entrance, her instincts went into alert mode. He was totally focused on someone or something. With his eyes gleaming dangerously, Naruto whispered, "It seems AIM has started to be infested by rats." When Conan realized the term for an enemy spy, her eyes widened. She attempted to shift into a better position to find the target, but Naruto himself grabbed her hand tightly. "You'll spook her. Let her gather the information she seeks from that over-talkative waitress. I get the feeling this woman is not alone," chided Naruto. Conan murmured, "How do you know she's a spy?" I can feel her fear, her anxiety, and that gives me the power to catch a glimpse of her mind. I can fully infiltrate her mind, but that will simply alert her remaining comrades who can be nearby. So I'm just brushing the edges of her mind with my dark powers. It seems Iwagakure is almost ready for a new offensive, said Naruto sternly. Hesitantly, Conan asked, "You're not bluffing about this, are you?" And noticed the same icy stare she had witnessed during their first encounter. A chill ran down her spine as she saw the ruthless and solemn expression in his eyes. Pain. Naruto caught a glimpse of the short, dark-haired woman leaving her seat and leaving the store. He looked over at Conan, who was standing there. "You know what to do." Before he vanished in a cloud of black smoke that effortlessly poured out of the window close to them, that was all he said. Conan barely had time to brace herself before she vanished in a whirlpool of paper petals as well. One thing was taught to Conan. Naruto Uzumaki was a crafty predator. He was certain of this possible spy, and it had taken her a few minutes to follow his trail. Sometimes she almost lost both of their tails, but after a few more minutes of looking, she was able to get them back. By the time she got to him, it must have taken her a long time. It was over. Naruto was standing in a dim alleyway that surrounded a dilapidated house. The worst kind of people lived in one of the capital's poorest neighborhoods. An easy hiding place for murderers and spies. However, their luck ran out this time. He was shielded from the raindrops falling from the sky by a tiny wave of dark chakra that was emanating from his body. 3 shivering humans lay in front of him. A young boy of their age and a middle-aged man must have been the spy Conan was referring to, along with a woman he recognized. With a chilly grin on his lips, Naruto remarked, "I must admit, it was quite a sound strategy to send an entire team of spies pretending as another poor family. It was not as dumb as I imagined." With tears in her eyes, the woman begged frantically, "Please, we are just poor people, we don't have anything." Perhaps they were wrong, but Conan felt sorry for her. Furthermore, there was no evidence to support his claim that they were spies, so how could she believe him? Only Naruto and his irrational hypothesis. And since these were her fellow citizens, she owed them greater allegiance than she did Naruto. At best, they were acquaintances who would eventually collaborate as teammates, and someday, perhaps, friends. The middle-aged man was encircled by a dark mass of chakra that began to raise him into the air. After the woman began to scream, the young boy who must have been their Sona tried to attack Naruto but was crushed, and his head now lay beneath Naruto's feet, in danger of being crushed at any time. "I can get the truth out of you easily, but that won't serve the purpose. Admit your crime and face Aim's justice. Or deal with me," murmured Naruto. She had only taken 2 steps in his direction when his glare forced her to stop. "That's enough, Naruto," yelled Conan. She bowed her head to Naruto and pleaded, "Please, we're innocent. We don't know anything." But his ruthless eyes never faltered. His gaze landed on the middle-aged man who was gasping for air while he was suspended in midair by Naruto's dark chakra tendrils. The little boy underfoot had long since given up resisting and was now looking at the scene with concern. Sometimes you must hurt others to know the truth, fall in order to grow, lose in order to gain, and learn the greatest teachings through pain. As he smashed the young boy's skull with his feet and spat the brains across the damp floor, Conan gaped in horror. The woman was showered with blood and guts as the middle-aged man's dark tendrils pierced him from all sides. Conan had never seen anything so gruesome and savage in her life. After witnessing her husband and son's horrific deaths, the woman let out a blood-curdling scream that must have reverberated through half of Aim. However, Naruto never winced, never paused, and was unmoved by the horror he had perpetrated. When the woman began spluttering out the truth, Conan's doubts about his training and what he had Donia or Kodoa were dispelled. When the woman finally acknowledged that she, the older man, and the now dead young boy were all Iwa spies, Conan was taken aback. They were dispatched to obtain battle plans regarding the forces that Aim had sent in the direction of the borders of Iwa. Possibly with the intention of starting an invasion and permanently destroying Aim. The woman was shivering badly by the time she revealed the whole truth. She was staring into Naruto's eyes with a visibly terrified expression. When she realized he was going to kill the woman too, Conan hurriedly said, "She might still be more helpful in giving more information." Naruto gave Conan a direct glance. "Is that an order?" he politely inquired. Conan gave a nod. Even though he might be stronger and more dangerous than she was still a Junin. Even though her village had just hired Naruto, it might have been too late to save the other 2 spies from learning more, but Hanzo-sama could undoubtedly learn more from this whining woman in front of them. As he had to accept her choice, Conan saw him growl in frustration. This was her country, and she, not him, was in charge of making decisions. And he was obviously annoyed by it. Naruto spat out, "It's your lucky day, woman," and gave Conan a stern look before disappearing into a cloud of black smoke. Conan witnessed the enemy female spy pass out and land on the ground covered in blood and flesh. As soon as he left, she let out a moan. It was obvious that Naruto Uzumaki would make her crazy with his antics in a few years if this meant working with him, if not months. He was a deadly ninja, though, and she couldn't deny that. He was able to adjust to the circumstances much faster than others because he was perceptive, alert, and possessed practical abilities. Although she had not yet witnessed his assassination abilities, he had already demonstrated the rest of them by identifying a spy, locating a whole ring, and even obtaining information at a high cost. Hanzo's intense interest in this boy was now clear to Conan. Uzumaki was a lethal killing machine for Naruto. On the brink of a new conflict, it was the brightest spiral symbol he had ever seen. Nevertheless, the memorial stone with his clan's symbol on it evoked emotions he didn't want to be associated with. Since they were unaware of his truth, his friends and younger clan members were unable to comprehend his feelings. He was supposed to be Uzu's covert weapon. Their village serves as a defense against the Jinchuriki and other villages' strong armies. Because the enemy would probably capture him or worse, kill him, he was not permitted to make a final stand with the Azukage. It would be catastrophic for his clan, which was already in danger of going extinct. He had been told explicitly from birth that his sole purpose was to serve as Uzu's weapon. He felt a little guilty at first, but he never had much to be grateful for. As a result, the instructors gave him more attention after he demonstrated his abilities. He also received better food and clothes, a home that was far better than the orphanage, even a little pocket money, and most importantly, the affection of his beloved Azukage. Although his Azukage was a good man, Naruto had always understood that the only reason the man treated him like family was because of his value to Uzu, not much more. But that was the most genuine relationship he had ever experienced, perhaps excluding the one he shared with Akeno and Nagato. His usefulness to Uzu and its people was the only reason they had put up with him. They hadn't lied to him, but they hadn't wasted any time in making sure he didn't forget that. He was simply glad to have a cause to fight for because they had not deserted him like his parents had. Just something for which his wretched life could go on. However, he was unsuccessful. He failed at the one task he had been given. In his dreams, he saw his village burning every night, heard his people screaming, and saw himself standing in the ashes of his destroyed country. The list of his failures to defend his people against Konoha Anbu's ambush seemed to go on forever. He let out a single tear, which immediately blended with the raindrops that fell upon him. "I'm sorry," Naruto muttered. This memorial stone was created by Akeno and some of the kids as a way to remember their lost family and their former country. When she first showed him this stone, he had just shrugged his shoulders, but he had been coming here every night without her knowing. Day after day, the flowers change. Katsuro-sama, it seems Akeno and Nagato might just be able to fulfill the dreams you had for our people. They'll carry on your will and change this world. Uzu's will burns brightly in them. I was not worthy enough for my parents to raise me. Neither could I become the weapon Uzu needed so desperately. I failed to protect you from dying, and I couldn't help but watch the last remnants of our clan be betrayed and killed by our supposed allies. For the first time, he was willing to even consider everything that had transpired in his life over the past few months, even though he had no idea why he was saying these things aloud to a stupid stone of all things. In order to keep his friends and the other clansmen from becoming alarmed, he had always shown them a cool-headed side of himself, but he shared their grief over Uzu's passing, if not more. When Uzu died, a piece of him died too. Uzu had been the only place he had ever known, the only thing that was close enough to family to give him a sense of purpose in life. He knelt next to the stone and held a few grasses under it. "I couldn't be the guardian you wanted me to be, but I will be the avatar of vengeance. I will rain down death and destruction over everyone that destroyed our nation. I will change this shinobi world, no matter the cost, so that there won't be any more sacrifices like you guys," stated Naruto. He placed the fresh flowers he brought today at the feet of the memorial stone, respectfully replacing the old ones he had placed yesterday. He then made a deep bow and left the cemetery. Meanwhile, a set of eyes kept a close watch on him. He had an odd feeling. AIM had finally been able to identify candidates they wanted to assign to Domino Squad after almost 2 weeks of selection and discussion. What an absurd name. Enemies in the ninja world were as terrified of the shinobi as they were of the name. However, any chance of intimidation was eliminated with a child like Domino. However, advising AIM on squad names was not his responsibility. For that sort of thing, he was definitely not compensated. He was asked to report to Hanzo's office in full military uniform, prepared for combat, which was intriguing. He might be speculating, but Hanzo seemed to be the kind of boss who evaluated employees based more on how well they met his standards than on their prior performance or reputation. Naruto had bought one of the nicer mercenary armors out of curiosity. His face was concealed by his customary black face mask and a plain shady-colored Anbu mask featuring a demon's face. When you combine that with his equipment, which was light bluish to dark greenish in hue, you have one of the best camouflaged soldiers that most ninjas would barely notice in the severe weather of aim. When he saw the guards outside Hanzo's chamber flinch when he approached them, he grinned. They were unable to identify him because he had only been here once and had never become overly friendly with anyone outside of Konan. He simply walked past them when they attempted to stop him, using their fear of him and his aura to hold them in place. Enough time to open the door and enter. He stepped into the room and let the frozen guards go unconscious in front of Hanzo and his closest advisors. His actions were worth the trouble because of their responses. The fatso on the other side was looking like a boiled potato, and another cunning-haired boy just eyed him warily. Galatea and Mifune were furious, and Konan twitched along with her. Naturally, his two closest friends were also present, but at the moment, they preferred to be somewhere else than here because they were worried about his antics upsetting their newfound allies. They failed to realize, however, that aim would be restrained by his fear of his power. He could easily enter their leader's office without the guards even being able to stop him, which posed a serious threat. Stop this country from mistreating its citizens or from fearing the wrath he could inflict on them. At the very least, it would force AIM to raise the bar for their shinobi training by enacting stricter regimens than their current infant programs. Oddly, Hanzo merely grinned at his blatantly defiant gesture. Even as Naruto stepped forward and nodded to the elderly man before moving to stand next to his friends, the sight only caused his supporters and ninjas to stare at him oddly. He only gave her a cheeky wink because he could see Akano hankering after him for a good little bop on the head. Nagato just shrugged. He would just have to adjust to his best friend's antics from now on. In addition to his introductory actions, the people in the room continued to stare at him because of his current attire. He actually resembled one of the rogue Anbu agents who had abandoned their home countries and typically stayed together in groups to survive the waves of hunter ninja like Kisame who were sent after them for their treachery. Given that there was no shortage of pawns in this world, perhaps he ought to try to recruit more of those individuals for the Akatsuki. Hanzo nodded, and Mifune moved forward. The 7 of you have been chosen to be a part of special group of warriors who shall answer our nation's call in this need of hour. You will go by the name of Domino Squad, assigned any mission that would help in protecting AIM from all threats. Not all of you know each other, and neither do we ask you to be friends if you don't want to. But Hanzo-sama has placed great hopes in you, and failure will not be accepted, declared Mifune with seriousness. As the now new team members looked at one another even more critically, Galatea's turn came to continue this brief ceremony. Speculating about one another's advantages and, more crucially, any obvious disadvantages. Regardless of their country or beliefs, shinobi would always be shinobi. A few days ago, we discovered a spy ring of Iwa that was trying to gather information about our deployments and strategies to be implemented across the border we share with them, in the hopes of launching an invasion. Further investigation has revealed that the Tsuchikage doesn't consider us much of a threat and has already sent a small company of Iwa shinobi to start attacking our border villages, which will be followed by the larger invasion force that will aim to strike at our capital after establishing proper supply lines through our territory so that their army doesn't starve or run out of weapons. Galatea explained with a grave tone and a worried gaze. The members of Domino Squad were looking alarmed because their country lacked the resources and strength to openly survive a war against any of the Great Five, which are Iwa, Kiri, Suna, Konoha, and Kumo. Since one of them has already made the decision to go to war, it would only be a rerun of the past, with the other villages attempting to seize AIM's meager resources or merely using their country as a battlefield, as was the case in the earlier Great Ninja Wars, to prevent significant damage to their own countries. But we will stop them all, Hanzo said resolutely. Naruto had to acknowledge the elderly man. All of his apprehensive soldiers felt more confident after seeing him, to the point where they bowed to Hanzo and pledged victory. Even his companions. However, he never nodded or bowed. Call him obstinate, but even when Mifune and Galatea gave him glares of disapproval, his pride remained unwavering. The other ninjas turned to face Naruto, who grinned, as Hanzo hinted, Uzumaki Naruto, I want to send you a bold message. I don't want Domino to stop them, but make an example. Naruto boldly asked, can these guys do what is needed for this mission? and received glares in return. Hanzo calmly stated, "They will have to since you are the team leader on this mission." This was the first time Naruto had raised an eyebrow. This was not what he had anticipated, but he controlled his astonishment and just nodded. "Then I'll make my intentions clear. I am going to butcher this entire Iwa company in the most brutal and terrifying manner. Iwa is a village that is deeply religious and fears the gods. If we make them believe that their gods are against this invasion, then they will stop. The Tsuchikage may not believe in these things, but his soldiers do. This mission will test the limits of your humanity, might even drive you crazy. If you feel that you are not fit for the job, opt out now," promised Naruto, allowing a portion of his chakra to leak. Everyone in the room started to yell at the boy for the open threat, but Hanzo's raised hand stopped them. "He's right. If we respond with brute force, Iwa will just be more pumped to start an invasion. To protect AIM and its citizens, you must do whatever Naruto asks of you. This is my order," stated Hanzo. "Hi," was each ninja's response. None of them appeared happy. "Everyone go and prepare, you leave in 4 hours. Galatea and Mifune you too. Naruto you stay," instructed Hanzo. Naruto silently gave them the finger as the two advisors departed, glaring at him with dark eyes. He and Hanzo were the only people still in the room when his team left. The elderly man nodded wearily as Naruto stated bluntly, "They're not ready. They have not seen what you have seen. They don't know the pain of losing their home, but you do. I don't approve of these measures, but I have seen what shinobi are capable of. And my nation does not have the strength to match the Great Five. Just how dark are you going to go?" Hanzo responded with seriousness. "Enough to break the souls of your soldiers. It will not be just the enemy who dies in this mission, but the souls of your soldiers as well. Akeno and Nagato have seen some of this dark side of the world, so they won't be as badly affected. I'd suggest to give these people at least a week's leave to cope after this mission," said Naruto. Hanzo nodded pitifully. "If that is all," Naruto said stiffly. Hanzo told the boy to stop, saying, "Don't walk in the darkness of this world for too long, Naruto." He enjoyed seeing Hanzo's surprise when he looked back with his single dark red eye and the malevolent, dark aura he had released. "You are mistaken, Hanzo. I am the darkness." Naruto moved quickly through the hallways until something snatched his arm out of the darkness. He was quickly drawn inside by the firm grip, and he almost stabbed the intruder in the neck with his sharp kunai before realizing it was Akeno. Naruto scoffed and reprimanded, "Akeno, I could have killed you. It'll take you more effort than that. What the hell is your problem, Naruto? I get it, you don't like AIM. But would it be nice for you to be at least cordial towards these people?" Akeno was tired. "Respect is earned, Akeno. And I have no desire of earning their respect when I am here for my own reasons, but I'll give you this, that if the members of our team manage to complete this mission on my terms, then I'll try to not antagonize them more than necessary," he said with a smirk. She let out a sigh. That was the best she could expect from him, but it was not what she wanted. It seemed more challenging than she had initially anticipated that Naruto would need to make more friends in AIM and possibly decide to leave after his contract expired. When she felt his hand on her cheek and could see the soft sparkle in his eyes through his demon mask, he brought her back to the present. "Besides, I don't need them when I have you." She gave him a hug and a smile, and he gladly obliged by putting his arms around her. Akeno shook his head when he said, "I'm sorry for not visiting you these past few days." Naruto casually broke the embrace and saw a narrowed expression on her face. "You were helping our people find homes. The younger children get settled with their new families. Nagato was also busy with some work, I understand that. Besides, Conan was there, so I was not all alone," he said. He seemed to have just forced her to eat something repulsive. She smiled as he asked inquisitively, "Akeno?" He could see it was forced, though. "That's nice. But next time, you and I are going to have dinner together. My treat for being so busy and not meeting you," said Akeno. He grinned. Naruto asked jokingly, "Who am I to refuse free food and drinks?" She was grinning as she gave Akeno a light shoulder punch, taunting him with, "Miser." Naruto joyfully put his hand around her shoulder and said, "Come on. I'll help you get your gear." With a joyful smile, Akeno winked at him and put her own hand around his waist, drawing them near to one another. "Who am I to refuse free labor?" As they left the hallway, they both laughed. The team was there with Galatea by the time they arrived at the city's gates. The woman nodded curtly to Akeno and shot Naruto a stern look, which he boldly returned. "The Iwa company will enter our border in the next few days. The 7 of you will be outnumbered and outgunned against them, so make every move carefully. advised Galatea. Naruto surveyed his group. This time, Galatea had forced them to buy and don the same mercenary attire and armor as Naruto, in contrast to their last encounter with Hanzo, when they were clad in their standard shinobi uniform. Additionally, they were all wearing demon masks, which gave the impression that they were renegade Anbu agents. The group gave their mission commander a nod, and Galatea motioned Naruto to move aside. Reluctantly, he did so. He looked at Galatea and said, "I don't know what you are up to, Naruto, but these are my soldiers. If I find out you have done them any unnecessary harm, then you will dearly pay." She smiled for the first time when Naruto said, "So, you're going to be with the backup? Far away but close enough to respond if we fail. Use this sharpness of yours to get your team out of this mission alive. I know you can do it, if you want to." She left him to face 6 people who were staring at him directly after saying those words. He could easily see the laid-back expressions of Nagato and Akeno, the doubtful one of Konan, and the almost hostile expressions of the other 3. Naruto couldn't help but laugh at how ironic the circumstance was. He had spent his entire life being trained to be a clandestine agent, working alone, and now he was expected to lead a whole team. It was truly unpredictable in life. Naruto gestured to the 3 boys wearing demon masks and said, "All right, you 3 introduce yourselves now." Yahiko. The boy with the orange hair said. The little midget with the twin tontos said, "Kyusuke." Despite the impressive staff on his back, the giant fatso responded, "Daibutsu." After ordering the final 3 members to introduce themselves, Naruto gave each of them a deck of cards with comprehensive details about their teammates' positions, backgrounds, and abilities. The team stared at him in confusion. "Come on, you can hardly expect me to take your word on everything when this is the first time we work together. The same goes for myself as well, so Galatea has given me these cards. Study each other's strengths and weaknesses along the way. If you have questions, ask when we stop for a break, if there is any. Clear?" asked Naruto with seriousness. AKA Kyusuke. Examining Naruto's own card, the midget held up his hand. Kyusuke read the word on the card and asked, "What do you mean dark powers?" Suddenly, the 3 boys sensed a new presence gently penetrating their mental barriers and lurking around their minds. When the presence suddenly entered their mindscape and they saw Naruto Uzumaki's lethal gaze, they became terrified. At the end of the trance, Naruto Uzumaki was grinning sweetly at the 3 boys. Naruto cheekily remarked, "And that is what we call dark powers, Lesson 01. Konan and Akeno palmed their faces. The other 3 boys displayed mild embarrassment as Nagato laughed. Everyone was about to unwind with one another when Naruto pulled out a map and motioned for them to approach him. Before long, the whole Domino squad was staring at their team leader, who was pointing at various locations on the map with his finger. Naruto asked gravely, "Iwa forces will be entering through our northern borders. There is a valley between the small villages and open lands. I plan to make it their graveyard. Don't expect to receive help from the patrol scouts because they will be dead. And we cannot allow Iwa forces to hit these villages, understood?" This time, he noticed that all of the AIM ninjas appeared to be very determined to defend their compatriots. He could respect their dedication and loyalty to their country, at least. "Time is of essence here, so Konan and I will scout this valley. Since we travel faster than you guys, it becomes imperative that you arrive in time. Yahiko, adopt an arrow formation and lead the rest of the team towards the valley. Can you do that?" asked Naruto. Yahiko's eyes were clear, indicating that he was taken aback by this new position and had not anticipated even a small leadership role. Even Kyusuke and Daibutsu appeared considerably more at ease with this development, and Naruto noticed Konan nod gratefully. Akeno shrugged, and Nagato nodded gratefully to his friend. Yahiko cheerfully said, "I'll do it, Captain," despite Naruto's inquisitive eyebrows being raised at the new, deferential title. "Very well. You guys shouldn't be more than a few hours behind us," told Naruto. Everybody gave a nod. Scatter. Naruto dissolved into black smoke and vanished in the pitch-black night, while Konan vanished into thousands of pieces of paper and flew through the air. The rest of the team was a little taken aback, but Yahiko was able to capture their interest, and they soon found themselves traveling at high speed down the difficult path. They would succeed. AIM's future depended on it. The rainstorm violently battered the window of the deserted building. The walls moaned, their flimsy foundations barely able to withstand the violent winds that swept through the whole space. Outside, the demolished houses and deserted landscape revealed the remains of a small village. There were no people, only the occasional animal scavenging for food. It was just another of AIM's abandoned settlements. A holdover from earlier ninja battles. evidence of their country's inability to defend its citizens and territories from foreign oppressors. But things would be different. Anger and guilt burned brightly in Conan's heart, causing her fists to clench. She always hated other villages after witnessing the repeated destruction of her country at their hands. AIM was in danger once more as a result of the impending start of another war, but this time their adversaries wanted to enslave their country and its citizens rather than just plunder them. Not acceptable. Even though she was aware that her people had not been able to defend themselves in the past, she was determined to do everything within her power to keep them safe. She had a mission. Even though she had to carry out uncomfortable duties during her brief tenure as a proud kunoichi, she was a devoted soldier who did it for her country. She turned to look at the boy in the corner who was whimpering. His hands were sweating and thrashing restlessly, sometimes flaying upwards as though he was trying to stop something or someone, and he was muttering unintelligible words while he slept. It was pathetic. She had never thought that a ninja with Naruto Uzumaki's strength and potential would have his own demons when she had first faced him. However, she was mistaken. She could tell that the boy was broken just by spending time with him, watching him, and witnessing his frequent visits to the cemetery where the Uzumaki Memorial was built. She could also see that he was currently going through a terrible nightmare. A weapon that had been damaged and was frantically looking for a new purpose and an opponent. It proved that this boy was more complex than the straightforward attack dog she had first assumed him to be. She had to admit that he was an intriguing target. She didn't know why Hanzo had given her the task of getting close to this boy. She initially thought of Naruto as merely a friend because he was not her type. However, their brief conversation and coffee together revealed that he had a similar past to hers. Someone who understood her feelings about everything. She became even more interested and determined to get to know him after repeatedly witnessing his unrestrained interactions with Akeno. Both to fulfill her own curiosity and primarily for the sake of her mission. Fortunately, the silencing seals he had placed around their room hours before going to sleep kicked in and prevented their silence from breaking when he woke up with a loud scream. Even though they had not yet come into contact with enemy forces, Conan couldn't help but believe that Naruto knew that something like this might happen to him and took preventative measures to keep them safe and maintain their stealth. As she approached him, she knelt down and touched his shoulder, causing him to recoil. When their eyes locked, she caught a fleeting glimpse of the atrocities he had witnessed and perpetrated. The suffering and remorse he endured on a daily basis. Conan calmly said, "It's over." He averted his gaze, obviously ashamed that he had allowed her to witness him in such a state. When he pouted, he actually looked kind of cute. He said clumsily, "Thanks," as she took her hand away and assisted him in standing up. His muscles complained loudly about sleeping on the cold floor, and Naruto got a few cracks for stretching them awkwardly. However, there was no other option because the abandoned house had no beds. He picked up his flask and drank water from it ravenously as he moved around. She just watched him, and it seems he noticed that she was looking at him for longer than was necessary. "What?" He squatted back. Unable to find the right words to describe her feelings, Conan said hesitantly, "Nothing. It's just strange, seeing you like." He muttered softly, "Having nightmares. I'm a freak, but still a human in the end," before returning to his water. Conan was sorry. She never gave it much thought that he might have issues like everyone else. Instead, she spent most of her time thinking about how this person could be used to meet AIM's needs and how his abilities could benefit her people. She made the decision to correct her error. Conan gave her a funny look as he said, "Have you talked about it with anyone? With Akeno or Nagato? They're your friends." She twitched her eyebrows as he laughed. He was incredibly annoying. As for Akeno, Naruto explained, but Conan saw him go silent when he was about to talk about his close female friend. "You girls are quite strange sometimes, no all the time. I can't even imagine having to discuss such a thing with Nagato. Imagine two teenage boys discussing about one of them having nightmares. I don't know about you, but it would be quite awkward for me and will give Nagato more trouble than necessary, besides he already has enough of them to begin with." She wouldn't let it go, would she? She only needed his silence as an answer. Subsequently, he merely entered a neighboring bedroom and opened his little scroll containing his toothbrush and paste. For a few minutes, Conan busied herself keeping an eye on the perimeter. But when her partner began to approach the house's door while only sporting boxers and a soap in his hands, her eyes widened a little. Conan snapped, "What the hell are you doing?" and got a smirk in return. "Doing something which you haven't done in months, taking a bath." That little thing burned bright red in her cheeks. Before going outside and letting himself get soaked by the constant rain, Naruto winked at her. Despite her annoyance, Conan felt obliged to steal a few glances, which gradually developed into a closely watched performance. The boy had expressed his less than modest views about his sexuality from an early age, and Naruto didn't give a damn. When he felt indifferent to the opinions or feelings of others, he would literally show it off. They were forced to wash themselves in the rain because there were no bathing facilities in this deserted village, Conan had to admit. Fortunately, Naruto had the grace to avoid taking a full naked bath, so he had no issues with that. By no means would she have objected. Conan recognized one of the reasons Akeno was drawn to this boy as she watched him wash soap over his finely chiseled body. Although Conan initially remarked that she had seen more attractive men, she couldn't deny Naruto's attractiveness. Observing his smooth red hair cascading across his face and the raindrops cascading across his chest. She quickly averted her gaze as he loudly teased, "You know, if you wanted a show you just had to ask." Conan hissed, "Shut up," and laughed. When she narrowed her eyes dangerously at him, Naruto grinned and said, "Come on, join me. Kami knows you stink." Conan snapped, "I don't." She immediately moved away from the window, leaving the obnoxious boy to finish his work. Her cheeks only became redder when he laughed. She sniffed her own clothing after she was certain he couldn't see, and even though she had thought she was clean, she felt the need for a wash. He's a jerk. Goddamn him. Thus, Conan sat next to Naruto 30 minutes after taking a shower and dressed in nothing but a t-shirt and tight shorts. Although she wouldn't say it aloud, she had to admit that after taking the bath, she felt a little better. Not to the arrogant jerk next to her, of course. Additionally, Conan had seen him sneaking a glimpse of her body while she was taking a bath, but he decided not to comment. "Feel better?" he inquired earnestly. "Maybe," Conan muttered, grinning and shaking his head. He pulled out an old lighter and a pack of cigarettes from the ceiling scroll nearby, which piqued her interest. He noticed a pair of eyes staring into his soul as he turned to light it. Conan's eyebrows went up a little in surprise and annoyance as she asked, "Really?" He casually replied, "What? It's fucking cold," but her stern expression remained unchanged. Conan wisely said, "It's not good for your health," and, to his surprise, he laughed heartily. "You say that as if we ninjas are going to live long?" His words made her cringe because they were so honest and grounded in reality. As he lit up his addiction, Naruto asked inquisitively, "Conan, we live in a world and perform jobs where any moment could be our last. Take this mission for example, it's practically suicide and we may die. So why not live life to the fullest?" Unable to find a suitable argument to refute his point, Conan hesitantly said, "Still," he grinned softly. He reassured, "That doesn't mean you have to live like I do." She caught a glimpse of the playful sparkle in Conan's eyes as he grinned. He made a tiny tick appear on her forehead as he taunted, "Very few people are as cool as me." Conan angrily spat, "You're an ass," and got a cheeky smile in return. "You're aware of your love for it, Naruto." A few hours later, when the other members of the team reached the meeting spot, they discovered Naruto and Conan studying a freshly drawn map while wearing their battle gear. Naruto complained, "I finally thought you guys would take more time to get here." Although he didn't like the lingering glances Kyusuke occasionally directed at an unaware Akeno, Naruto was internally satisfied that if the AIM ninja tolerated his remarks so easily, then his friends must have had a decent discussion with them. Based on the way Nagato was standing next to Yahiko, it appeared as though a friendship might be beginning, and Daibutsu was still distant but less hostile. Akeno rolled her eyes, and Nagato and the boys simply shrugged. Later he might have to make amends, but for now they had an important task to complete. "Did you scout the enemy or the valley?" As the group went around the map, Akeno inquired inquisitively. "Actually, both. I spent a few hours observing the enemy camp while Conan scouted the ambush zone and made this map. There are about 100 of them, and based on their weapons and behavior, it appears that they are ninjas of low skill who work well in a horde." With a sly smile on his face, Naruto remarked, "I infiltrated their camp and most likely subtly suggested to the enemy commander that we march through the valley at midnight." "You are aware that you had the ability to murder that commander?" Kyusuke proposed. "No, you fool. Be a ninja for once and act from the shadows, because that would have put the enemy forces on high alert." Naruto reprimanded him severely, and the other boy bowed his head slightly in shame. "Naruto, do you think we will back off if we carry out our plan with these guys?" Yahiko asked candidly, meeting his leader's gaze directly. "Yes, for a while. Permanently, doubtful," Naruto said candidly. The squad exchanged grim looks, which Naruto didn't miss but permitted because he wanted these ninjas to come to terms with the harsh reality. "Tell us what we have to do then." Naruto looked into the boy's eyes, stole a quick glance into his mind, and smiled devilishly when he saw that the boy wanted to do anything to protect AIM, even sacrificing his soul if necessary. The team was actually taken aback when Daibutsu spoke in his rough voice. Konan and Nagato shared the same expression. Despite his doubts, Kyusuke would follow orders because he lacked the courage to challenge Hanzo's orders or the group decision. He had to have faith that they would obey his orders, but he was more concerned about Yahiko and Akeno because he could see the innocence in their Isa more so in Yahiko's and less in Akeno's. Naruto scowled. He disliked working in big groups because there were too many people to rely on. It was very frustrating that he couldn't do that to these AIM ninjas, unlike his minions in the Akatsuki, who would follow his orders without question or risk death in the process. Iwa had been one of the villages that had taken part in the destruction of Uzu, and they were going to pay for it, if not more than Konoha. Nevertheless, he was somewhat looking forward to this mission. The anguish, sorrow, and hopelessness that Iwa had caused his clan would be multiplied tenfold. His retaliation was due. Here's the plan. The world was in complete darkness, with the moon long since hidden in the shadow of the dark clouds, and heavy rains still falling from the sky that night. The weather was so cold that even tiny rumblings reverberated through AIM's lands as a group of almost 100 Iwa shinobi boldly charged through its territory. With his sword resting calmly on his back and a determined expression in Shirazu Nakamura's eyes, the tall, bulky man at the front, of more than 6 feet tall and with a frame that could crush average people, led the soldiers behind him. This mission was crucial to his career as a recently promoted Junin, if he ever hoped to regain the lost honor of his family. His mother and a few of his cousins committed suicide because they could not cope with the social exile, and Shirazu's entire clan was shunned. His father and brothers had been defeated by Konoha in the last war and had turned themselves into the enemy. They were captured as prisoners of war, and during interrogation they broke and provided vital information that greatly damaged Iwa. Their countrymen never forgiven that betrayal. Everything would change now, though, because he had put in years of hard work and fulfilled all of his superiors' requests. He had done enough to attract the attention of the wise old Tsuchikage, who had given him a promotion and even a command. If he could reclaim a sizable portion of AIM territory, his family's honor would be restored and he would once more be able to live with dignity among his people. Upon witnessing the grousing among his men, Shirazu scowled and cursed the Junin commander for providing him with the weakest of Iwa shinobi. Fortunately for them, AIM was a poor, weak village with no credible shinobi except for a few and their leader, none of whom would be out here on the border. Most of these punks were Chunin, high on bravado and arrogance rather than actual competence. Shirazu's reputation was well known in Iwa, and most shinobi avoided him like plague. To think such a ninja gained command was the ultimate insult, but in Iwa you follow orders or face execution. The Junin became more alert when he saw the valley approaching in front of him, and he signaled his men to stop their grudging conversation, liking their leader even less than before. Shirazu asked Izanagi, the creator, to give him the strength he needed to complete this mission. Shirazu noticed that the weather was growing colder as his company began to move through the valley, and that the darkness was growing until he could see less than 5 feet ahead. Why was this place so gloomy? Although it was a relief that his sensors did not detect any enemy presence, navigating through this gloomy valley hole was still challenging. What was that? One of his Chunin yelled. Shirazu turned and glanced around him quickly. He glared murderously at the Chunin, who was fretting nervously, but he saw no one, felt no presence. Many soldiers laughed as Shirazu yelled, "Shut your mouth, Nagi, or you'll piss your pants." The poor man looked down in shame. The company resumed their charge, but Shirazu was paying closer attention to his surroundings this time. He had a gut feeling that something was off here. He concentrated on his senses, choosing to use his nose and ears because he couldn't see very far ahead. Nothing was there at first, but he noticed that after paying more attention. Soft murmurs. Skulking in the dark, but getting bigger every second. Shirazu shouted, "Company, alert," and swiftly swung his sword. He was only a moment late when the valley was filled with the cries of 1,000 voices that sounded like animalistic creatures. The sound was so primordial, so vile, so evil that it sent tremors through the Iwa shinobi's bodies. But what followed sent their company into a complete panic. At speeds that were impossible for humans, a mass of dark shadows jumped hundreds of feet from the top of the valley. As the shadows seized 2 of Shirazu's men, he was stunned and immobilized by the sight of the lone red eye at the front of the shadow. They vanished into the night, never to be seen again, their cries echoing throughout the valley. When he believed the worst was over, a number of dark, paper-like objects began to rain down from the sky at breakneck speed. 30 of Shirazu's men were killed before they could even scream, and he could only watch helplessly. In a panic, some of his soldiers began to flee back towards the valley's entrance, but they had only taken 20 steps when flaming red flames erupted from the damp areas, killing them. Even as they witnessed so many of their fellow Iwa soldiers being mercilessly burned alive, the remaining soldiers clumsily held onto their weapons, their desperate eyes looking for any enemy to strike back at. The survivors' hearts are being torn apart by their screams. Shirazu yelled, "Regroup, circle formation." Suddenly, the darkness in the area lurched towards the group of 60 Iwa survivors after a demon-like laughter reverberated throughout the valley. The men were swept into the unknown like a raging river as the darkness enveloped them one by one. The terrible screams of his men, their cries for assistance, the sound of flesh being torn, blood hitting the ground, and bodies collapsing everywhere made Shirazu shudder. Furthermore, he was unable to see anyone or anything. The last of their resolve was broken as the darkness gradually faded and they saw the remaining survivors waiting. The battlefield was covered in corpses. All of their limbs were viciously severed, and numerous male genitalia were left strewn about. A few soldiers were crucified to wooden stumps, and several heads were raised on spears. There was blood and flesh all over the place, along with the stench of rotting bodies. This was an animal mark rather than a human one, or a demon. The degree of savagery has not been seen since the beginning of human history. All of them saw visions of their cruel and agonizing deaths when the black smoke came back with a vengeance and rushed towards his small group. Shirazu even attempted to break it, believing it to be a genjutsu, a terrible dream from which he was meant to awaken, but his heart leapt in fear when nothing changed. "Run!" he shouted. "What the hell is happening? Demons? Monsters? Ghosts? They're ghosts. Captain Shirazu, the corpses are moving." When Shirazu turned to look behind him and saw the corpses of his slain comrades crawling in their direction, his face went completely white. Even those without limbs hobbled, and those who were crucified fought back against the Kanai who had killed them by embedding them in the post. Their throats are screaming inhumanely, and all of their eyes are black. Desperate to escape these godforsaken lands, he quickly turned away, to escape this hell and these demons. He and the other 15 Iwa shinobi who were running with him were still being pursued by the dark smoke. As the black smoke drew nearer, his men continued to scream. Shirazu heard the sound of water suddenly up ahead. Squinting, he could make out the end of the hellish valley on the other side of a small lake. He let out a sigh of relief. When his nightmare came to an end, almost half of his men rushed forward in the hopes of escaping death. To the horror of all, the Iwa shinobi fell quickly into the water when they stepped on the lake. Blood briefly drifted across the placid lake, and shapes of human souls screamed out of it before being swiftly engulfed by the shadows. A figure slowly surfaced from the water, its female form covered in the blood of the Iwa shinobi that had been slain inside the lake. Her dark eyes and that hideous smile shone brightly as she waved a hand at Shirazu and his remaining 4 soldiers, her bright silver hair swirling in the air like a raging demon. "Come. Join us." When Shirazu noticed the army of undead corpses approaching his group, he yelled, effectively trapping them. With a quivering voice, Shirazu exclaimed, "Nagi, Kuru, Shiro, Haru, Manji formation." "Don't worry, senpai." When Shirazu turned to face the Chunin, he noticed a strange tone in the man's voice and realized something terrible had happened when he saw that crazed smile. The other 3 of his allies shared Nagi's insane smile and had their own kunai aimed at their throats. Like they were possessed by blood. When Shirazu saw the remaining members of his men slicing their own necks crazily while grinning, he collapsed to his knees. After a few gurgling noises, their corpses struck the cursed lands for the last time, never to rise again, and their blood poured all over him. From head to toe, the Iwa commander shuddered. The mass of dark shadow with the lone red eye loomed dangerously over him, and the army of undead corpses had surrounded him. The angel of death was still urging him to join her in the lake of death. He sensed that his energy was running low and that his sanity would eventually leave his body. Shirazu let out a shriek. The Domino Squad was in shock. Their gaze swept over the barbaric slaughter they had inflicted upon the adversary. They had long since stopped retching, but they still didn't understand how Naruto could maintain his composure while giving instructions to the now mad Iwa commander. Their squad leader's belief that his soldiers were murdered by ghosts and demons and that AIM was a cursed place that should never be touched was undoubtedly driving the man even more insane. Shirazu was reduced to a mere husk by the time Naruto had completed his manipulation. A lifeless shell of a person was left behind, and they began to return to the boundaries of Iwa. As soon as that was finished, Naruto turned and delivered a devastating punch to Yahiko's face, sending him crashing. Surprisingly, nobody on the team attempted to step in. Perhaps it was because of the shock they were experiencing or the murderous look in Naruto's eyes as he cornered the boy who was shaking. That didn't matter at all. Naruto screamed angrily, "You had one job, Yahiko. One. And you screwed it up, risked the entire mission." "I couldn't do it," Yahiko said pitifully, eyes welling with tears as Naruto seized him by the collar. "Everybody did their part. I and Konan initiated the attack as shadows and paper weapons. Nagato burned those men alive with his trap seals. Daibutsu brutally murdered those men when they got trapped in my smokescreen. You were supposed to crucify them, but you failed and Nagato was nearly overwhelmed. Kyusuke created that lake and worked with Akeno to murder those Iwa shinobi. Even Akeno created that terrifying illusions of souls leaving the lake," murderously screamed Naruto. He picked up the boy, flipped him around wildly in the air, and then slammed him to the ground. A crunching sound indicated that Yahiko's nose had cracked. As Naruto began viciously kicking Yahiko in the chest, Konan gasped in horror. The bastard continued to kick Yahiko even after the latter coughed up blood. She clenched her fists and stepped forward, but she was stopped by a firm hand on her shoulder. The large ninja's hold on her was firm as she jerked to her side and noticed Daibutsu shaking his head. Konan watched helplessly as her teammates did nothing to halt the torture. Yahiko was beaten black and blue by Naruto, who refused to back down, even launched a tooth into the air. When Naruto halted and seized the bleeding boy by the neck, Yahiko appeared to be almost dead. "You call yourself a shinobi? A defender of your nation? A protector of your comrades? Don't screw with me. You're a disgrace. You risked the mission, endangered your comrades and your nation. You're weak, and the weak don't deserve to live," said Naruto with an icy voice. The weapon was about to strike Yahiko's heart when it was stopped by a firm hand. Naruto's shoulders were firmly grasped by another hand. When he looked up, he saw Nagato standing behind him, shaking his head, and Akeno holding the kunai so that it couldn't pierce Yahiko's heart while crying. Akeno begged, "Let it go, Naruto. Please." They watched him become enraged as he scanned the team, who all silently pleaded with him. Hanzo had granted him the authority to kill anyone who threatened the mission or his soldiers in his capacity as team leader. Even the bleeding orange-haired boy had accepted his fate and was now slumped on the ground, so none of them could blame him if he killed Yahiko. Looking at the sobbing Yahiko on the ground, Naruto angrily shook his friends away from him, his desire to kill being evident in his eyes as he let out his pent-up rage. Being a shinobi means not protecting, but killing, maiming, causing pain, suffering, carnage, and death to everyone and everything you are ordered to do. We are all murderers, disposable pawns, hired tools, and we don't deserve any honor or mercy. Naruto said harshly, making his allies wince, "This is just the beginning. If you are true ninja of aim, then this is what it's going to take to make sure your weak nation survives this war." He stepped over the bleeding Yahiko and gave him a direct look. The others gasped in surprise as Naruto said bluntly, "You'll never be a soldier, never be strong enough to do what's needed for your nation, always be a liability on your comrades, and I won't have that. I'm putting in a request to have you thrown off the team." He looked at them sternly. "We're done here. Grab your things and this trash of a ninja here, we're going back to the capital." He began to move forward while speaking, a grin that was both devilish and angry coming to his lips. Mission accomplished. On top of one of the mountain peaks sat a tall woman. Her seasoned eyes remained focused on the area where she could sense her subordinates' chakra signatures. She was able to sense their horror, their grief, Yahiko's despair, and Naruto's rage. At the moment, Domino Squad was in disarray. And with good reason, given what they had just done for AIM. Even for a seasoned ninja like Galatea, the massacre was terrifying, but she had witnessed Naruto take command and ensure his soldiers performed their duties. The boy never hesitated, never flinched, and never felt bad about the cruelty he had done. Even though it was required, Galatea didn't have to agree with it, not to mention give it your blessing. Nevertheless, this was necessary for AIM to live. She made the never-ending rain fall far from her body by allowing her chakra to flow freely. With great care, she removed a black book that contained the team's individual photos and private information. There was no mention of their names, and now she had to assess these ninjas and give them codenames for upcoming missions. Kyusuke. Small. A potential shinobi who lacks confidence but is capable of obeying commands. Risky when using weapons and Suiden ninjutsu. Daibutsu. Thick. A ruthless warrior capable of finishing the task. Nasty with his staff, and very strong physically. The rest of the skills are mediocre, but taijutsu is dangerous. Yahiko. Pretext. Possesses some potential but lacks the mental toughness and willpower. Loyal to AIM and his allies. Good with Sweden and Kaiten. Review is required. Angel, Conan said. Possesses leadership qualities and is the team's second strongest member. Taijutsu is weak, but ninjutsu and genjutsu are excellent. Can take over as squad leader in the event that the current one passes away or betrays their allegiance. Echo, said Nagato. Ninjutsu and fuinjutsu are deadly. Devoted to his team, but especially to his closest pals. Until complete loyalty to AIM is established, a true shadow of the squad leader must be closely monitored at all times. Akeno. Nope. A beautiful kunoichi with deadly genjutsu abilities. Her medical skills are incredible, but her ninjutsu and taijutsu are mediocre. She is crucial to the team because she is the only medic and appears to be loyal to AIM despite having feelings for the squad leader. Until further notice is needed, surveillance must continue. Naruto. Kudos. Given that he is the only team member capable of countering all 5 elemental ninjutsu and harbors a great deal of animosity toward the Great 5 villages, the codename is appropriate. Supposedly Uzu's demon, a true Black Ops soldier in every way. Unless directed to do so, they never enjoy taking prisoners. Not entirely loyal to AIM, but useful as an asset. It needs to be monitored at all times. With her observations neatly written down, Galatea closed the black book. Apart from her, only 2 individuals in the nation had access to this private information. Hanzo and Mifune, the head of their ally, the Samurai Nation. She was very curious to see how Domino Squad would develop. Everyone hated Naruto at the moment, with the exception of Nagato and Akeno, and it was safe to say that they still didn't fully trust one another. The renegade Uzumaki didn't care about what people thought. Nevertheless, he knew how to produce outcomes. It would at least take Iwa some time to consider another incursion after what had transpired tonight. If there was one at all, the Tsuchikage's religious fanatics would be pleading with the Rock Village to halt the invasion after they learned of the atrocities committed against their soldiers in the cursed land of AIM. If Iwa continued their hostile actions, it would allow AIM time to prepare further. It was impossible to attack Iwa. In addition to inciting a major village, it might also bring the religious fanatics together and provide the Tsuchikage with justification for destroying AIM. Holding their cards close and only moving when Iwa did the same was their only choice. Naruto gazed at his hands, which still bore blood stains. Retaliation was satisfying, despite popular belief, for him, at least. In this broken world, there was nothing left that was right or wrong. He was pleased to have killed the Iwa shinobi in such a ruthless way. The pain he had caused was only retaliation for their self-centered treatment of Uzu at a time when his country had never threatened the Stone Village. He had done them all and would continue to do them all because they deserved it. But his hatred of Fire Nation and Konoha was greater than anything else. The allies who murdered his people and betrayed his village. Konoha and its inhabitants were the thing he detested the most in the entire world. While Konoha always advocated for peace while pursuing war on the other side, at least the other villages never hesitated to commit war crimes. They were the ones who frequently raided Kiri's supply lines, sanctioned Iwa, controlled many smaller villages, and incited Sand by stealing their ninja and business contracts. Kumo was the only village where Konoha didn't meddle, and that was only because of the strong rakeage and their larger ninja force. He had finally been given the opportunity to exact his retribution. He was ecstatic as he stared at the note that Hidan had sent him. He had underestimated the usefulness of his minions. The groups he had dispatched with various goals were making headway. At this point, Akatsuki had 3 bases. One in AIM, one in Kusa, and one on the Suna-Konoha border. He had time, but the money and weapons were coming in a little slowly. Nearly 100 bandits and a few low-level rogue shinobi from various villages had apparently been recruited by his top minions. He would have to personally ensure that only those who could stay faithful to his organization survived, even though they would only be useful as cannon fodder. It would be necessary to purge the remainder. He had ultimately sparked a conflict between the 2 countries by demolishing the dam, which was valuable to Suna, and attacking Konoha outposts close to the same border. A large invasion force was also on the verge of being launched by Konoha to destroy Suna's frontal forces. Naruto thought gravely, I can't have that. Suna is crucial for my revolution. He turned to face his group, who were sheltering in a dilapidated house. The others were gathered around the small fire that Nagato had started in the middle, soaking up the warmth in the chilly weather. Daibutsu and Kyusuke were talking to Nagato. Konan was fuming in a corner, and Akeno was tending to Yahiko's wounds. For some reason, the scene seemed empty to Naruto. something that even people would quickly forget. Even his closest friends were angry with him for what he had done with Yahiko, and they both decided to keep their distance from him for a while. He didn't know, or more. But he was aware that it was the proper course of action. Yahiko needed to toughen up if Domino Squad was to be sent on high-risk missions like the most recent one because he posed a threat to the team's survival in addition to himself. Additionally, Naruto detested ninjas who make a noble oath to defend their country and then let their morals stand in the way of their honor. It was the epitome of hypocrisy. These were the kinds of moments that made him long for Uzu. Despite Akino's and Konan's best efforts, he was unable to feel the same love and affection for AIM, and his revolution and revenge were the only things that kept him alive, or its people. And following his most recent stint, he had Doubtsa, squad leader. To his surprise, Yahiko was standing behind him when he turned around. Thanks to Akino's efforts, the boy's bleeding had stopped, but he still had dark bruises on his face that would at least take a week to go away. Akino and Konan stood behind him. He glared at the two girls, who exchanged the same disapproving glances before flinching. "Leave us," Naruto commanded, but Akino objected. Yahiko was hissed. Now, to Naruto's astonishment, the girls glared at the injured boy before grudgingly returning to the house. When Yahiko knelt before him and bowed his head in embarrassment, he arched an eyebrow. Naruto stopped himself from making more snide comments after noticing the boy's dejected expression. "I failed everyone and I accept my mistake, but I don't want to be thrown off the team," said Yahiko with integrity. Naruto asked sharply, "What makes you think I'm going to change my mind?" Yahiko said regretfully, with a tear in his eye, "I don't know. All I do know is that I want to serve my nation, protect my teammates. I don't want to be this weak ever again. I nearly got Nagato killed." Naruto took advantage of the opportunity to steal a peek into the sensitive boy's thoughts. He caught a glimpse of Yahiko burying his own father, his sick mother, and his younger brother, whom he had been providing for with his meager ninja salary. The boy was extremely impoverished. "If the fighting in this world doesn't stop, then I'll forcefully do so by becoming the god of this world." Naruto stopped. His brief exploration of the boy's recollections had led him to a scene in which Yahiko stood in front of his father's grave, sporting his brand new ninja headband. Because he had experienced the pain himself, the boy had a dream in his eyes and a resolve to make a difference in the world. After a few moments of silence, Yahiko ventured to turn to face the boy again, only to find Naruto staring at the ground. There was an odd expression in his normally icy eyes. Silently, Naruto questioned, "What do you really want, Yahiko?" Yahiko said, "To support my family, defend my country, but most of all I want peace in this world so people can live their lives happily." And Naruto smiled momentarily. "You're naive." Yahiko scowled. He had not heeded the girl's warnings that this would be a waste of time. Perhaps Naruto was a jerk after all. "But you have spirit." With those final, cryptic words, Naruto stood up and left, leaving behind a very irritated and anxious Yahiko, whose future was still as uncertain as it had been prior to this exchange. The Domino Squad was alert. They looked forward as their leader's eyes were fixed on them with pride. Congratulated Hanzo and turned to face Naruto first. "You did well. AIM is proud to have soldiers like you. You delivered on your promise. Since you are not my ninja, I can only reward your bravery and leadership in other way." "Ask what you want," graciously replied Hanzo. The soldiers' stiffening was not missed by Galatea, or the fear in their eyes as they glanced at Naruto and Yahiko in a subtle exchange. Despite his stoicism, a drop of perspiration trickled down the orange-haired boy's forehead. "I want to nominate Yahiko as squad leader. In my absence or in the event of my death, I would like him to take command of this squad." Hanzo could see the astonished expressions on each squad member's face. Even Yahiko's lips were quivering and his mouth was open. They made an effort to control their feelings, but it was clear that this was unexpected. Naruto never faltered as the AIM leader gazed into his eyes. His steely eyes met Hanzo's with pride and assurance, and Hanzo could see that Naruto was serious. "Very well. From this day forth, Yahiko shall be the deputy squad leader and your second in command. I am also making you the captain of this squad from now on, and expect great things from someone of your talent Uzumaki Naruto," stated Hanzo. Yahiko did not move. After he saw Naruto nod to Hanzo, the boy turned to face him and gave him a gentle slap on the head, forcing him to bow. The rest of the team did the same. Before the boy turned into smoke and left through the window, Hanzo and Naruto nodded briefly. AIM's leader stood up from his seat and ordered the squad to stand back. These young soldiers were the best AIM had to offer, and they gave him hope. It was clear from a single look in Yahiko's direction that the boy was not entirely prepared for the part that had been offered to him. Not at all. But that spark was in him. The boy just needed a chance in the right direction to harness that fire that could carry soldiers through the most horrific circumstances. Naruto had chosen to give him something. Hanzo wasn't sure if he should be intimidated or impressed by Naruto Uzumaki. He was a leader, a soldier, a spy, and most importantly, he had the ability to see right through people. Actually, if Galatia's observations were any indication, literally. And Hanzo had the unshakable feeling that the boy would accomplish something significant one day. What the hell was that? The question everyone had been wondering was asked by Akeno. They all looked at one another before turning to face Yahiko, who was still in disbelief over his promotion. Nagato sighed and remarked, "You can never tell when it comes to Naruto." With curiosity, Kyusuke questioned, "Is he always this unpredictable?" "Most of the time." Nagato answered. He gulped when Konan turned to face Yahiko and met the boy's eyes directly. Konan questioned directly, "What did you two talk about?" With a frown starting to appear on his face, Yahiko admitted, "Nothing. I asked him to reconsider his decision and give me a chance. He mocked me again, but just before walking away he said I had spirit. I don't understand." Nagato abruptly inquired, "Were you upset or emotional while speaking to him?" "Yeah, I guess," was Yahiko's bewildered response. He couldn't understand why this was significant. Nagato and Akeno exchanged knowing glances, and Daibutsu saw the recognition in Nagato's eyes. To their surprise, the rest of their teammates were giving them stern looks. Daibutsu said gravely, "Well, you obviously know what happened, or have a theory." Nagato rubbed his temple and sighed wearily as Akeno twitched uneasily. He knew he couldn't conceal this any longer after noticing the piercing glances he was getting from the others. Not after Naruto had already used his powers in combat and given them hints about them. Naruto can look into people's minds, especially when their emotions are out of control. He must have seen brief glimpses of some of your memories, and something made him change his decision. You have to understand, this was unusual even for him. Naruto is never one to be merciful or offer pity. Yahiko, there must have been something truly strong in your memories that made him change his mind, bluntly stated Nagato. Yahiko was dumbfounded. Kyusuke exclaimed in a panic. He saw through Yahiko's mind. Wait, does that mean he can see through ours too? This is dangerous. Daibutsu muttered. With her fists clenched shut, Konan growled, he had no right to do that. He may be squad leader, but our memories are our personal property. Akeno was about to defend her best friend's behavior when Konan turned quickly and began to march back towards Hanzo's chambers, but she stopped when Yahiko's hand tightened around her shoulder. She turned to face her friend, surprised to see a determined expression in his eyes. "I'll take care of my own business, Konan," Yahiko stated bluntly. She protested, but he said softly, "Thank you for your concern," before letting go and turning to leave after giving the others a brief nod. The two girls were left staring at each other's faces as Nagato departed silently as well, followed by Kyusuke and Daibutsu. Akeno gave her teammate a weary smile. "Boys are fucking crazies," Konan muttered, grinning slightly herself. Akeno saw the other girl frown and reassured her, "Trust me, you'll get used to his antics over time. He's not a bad person, Konan. I just can't understand what goes through his head. As a ninja I can trust him to have my back, but as a friend," Konan said with hesitation. Akeno pointed to the girl with the silver hair and asked cautiously, "Is that what you two are? Friends?" Konan grinned slightly. "For now, I guess." While Konan relished the range of emotions that flashed through the silver-haired girl's eyes, Akeno nodded tightly. Akeno was gorgeous, Konan had to admit. She had that dazzling spark in her personality and appearance. The light that could brighten the dreary existence of individuals like her and Naruto. However, she questioned whether Naruto even knew that people could afford to be deserving of love. But he fled from becoming attached to people after his own family abandoned him. Naruto was terrified of being abandoned once more. It was depressing. Akeno said inaudibly, "Want to have some food?" which caused Konan to raise an eyebrow in surprise. Konan asked bluntly, "With me? You sure?" and smiled when Akeno shrugged. Konan's cheeks turned red as the Uzumaki girls smirked and walked by him, whispering a few words. "I can deal with some competition." After that, Akeno left, and Konan was forced to pursue the girl. Her lips quivered in astonishment and annoyance, and her blush was clearly visible. She didn't like Uzumaki Naruto more than anything else in the world. Did she not? The following day, Naruto wandered through Aim's streets without a specific destination in mind. He found himself taking a leisurely walk around the capital because he had just a few hours before his departure and wanted to avoid his friends. He kept thinking about the impending battle between Konoha and Suna and how Akatsuki would be involved. Even though his friends helped him start this war, it was wrong to risk Nagato and Akino's lives now that they had a future in Aim. Being in charge of Akatsuki by himself was still very taxing and constantly tense. Errors were what he could not afford. He knew only one person who could help him prepare for his impending mission, which would require a clear head. Naruto touched the building's door while observing the shadowy crowds of people nearby. Beginning with small-time criminals hiding in the shadows and drug dealers peddling to addicts in the alleys. Prostitutes also freely roamed this area of the capital in an attempt to attract potential clients. Most people wouldn't feel at ease in this setting, but he was anything but typical and felt right at home. As he walked into Aim's priciest pleasure shop, he noticed a few men staring at him with jealousy. He suppressed a laugh when he thought about how Akano or Conan might react if they saw him here. It would be entertaining if he took some photos. He noticed a pretty brunette seated at the desk as he made his way to the reception area. She smiled warmly at him and had a good figure. He looked at her name tag, which read, Aki, and she said sweetly, "Welcome to Azure, how may I help you?" He gave her a pleasant smile in return, even though it was clear that the name was a fake. Naruto remarked nonchalantly, "Well, I just need to have some good time. Think you can arrange that?" "Then you've arrived at the right place, sir. Here are our list of professionals that can cater." He interrupted her by setting a substantial amount of money on her desk, enough to cause her eyes to widen. He was charging Hanzo a hefty fee for each hour he spent in Aim, a poor country with limited resources and wealth. Although his services were far from inexpensive, Hanzo was willing to pay for them because he knew he would ultimately benefit more from the transaction. A small squad's massacre of the Iwa Company serves as evidence of that. He said bluntly, "I need your best." As she accepted the big bundle of Ryo, Aki dreamily said, "Of course, sir. I assure you that our professional will not disappoint you at all. The sheer sum exceeds what the poor girl would earn over the course of the year." Yes, it was a shit world. Grinning, he let the girl take the lead. Instead of being the freak he was, he might be able to enjoy this fleeting moment in his life as a regular person for a few hours. Aki carried him to the door of a room after he had climbed 2 floors. From the tiny opening beneath the door, he could see lights of various hues burning inside. Aki unlocked the final wooden barrier, and Naruto was pleasantly surprised to see a gorgeous blonde standing in front of him. The woman, who was easily in her early 20s, had a killer rack and a very curvaceous body. In addition, most women would kill to have an ass. The next few hours would undoubtedly be enjoyable. A few hours later, Yahiko was occupied with finding his enigmatic team leader, while the rest of his teammates were having fun in their spare time. He didn't understand Naruto Uzumaki, a ninja whom Yahiko both admired and was afraid of. Naruto had given him a chance despite his lackluster performance on the first mission. A chance to establish himself and serve both his family and his country. Although the whole squad had anticipated that Naruto would expel Yahiko, he ended up becoming the next in line to lead Domino's squad. But Yahiko knew in his heart that he wasn't prepared. He still needed to get over the last obstacle that separated him from the other soldiers on his team. Otherwise, he would simply be useless and end up killing his friends. And that was not acceptable. He had already explored most of the capital, including Naruto's apartment, but the older boy was nowhere to be found. Yahiko was forced into the red light district due to a lack of alternatives, and he didn't think he would find Naruto there. When he saw Naruto leaving the most costly brothel in the capital with a silly smile on his face, the words escaped his lips. It somehow made him look younger than he actually was. But when he saw Yahiko staring at him in disbelief, his smile vanished. When the older boy narrowed his eyes and came toward him, Yahiko clenched his jaw shut. Naruto asked bluntly, "What the hell are you doing here?" "I was looking for you." "I wanted to thank." Naruto's laugh, which quickly evolved into a derisive laugh, stopped Yahiko. The squad leader shot him a derisive glance, and he winced. "Thank me? The only reason your worthless ass is still on the team and received a promotion is because I want you to fail. I want you to realize how useless you are when you get one of your team members killed," heartlessly responded Naruto. He began to move away, pushing the unsuspecting boy out of his way. "You're not a great asshole." Naruto hesitated. What the devil was wrong with this boy? His jaw was clenched shut. Yahiko ought to have some common sense and avoid him after everything that had transpired. However, the boy with the orange hair moved ahead of him. When Yahiko knelt before the Uzumaki, his breathing stopped. As he kept his head down to avoid looking the older boy in the eye, Yahiko said earnestly, "I don't care whether you gave me a chance to watch me fail or succeed, it doesn't matter. At first I didn't understand what threat my nation actually faces, but now I know. And I don't want to watch my home, my people burn to death." The little courage he had gathered in his heart might just be crushed by it. Naruto said bluntly, "You're weak and naive," and was taken aback when Yahiko gave him a nod. "Yes. That is why I want you to teach me how to be like you." When Yahiko looked up this time, he discovered that he had succeeded in surprising the redhead boy. Naruto was staring at Yahiko with an odd expression in his eyes. Curious, Naruto questioned, "Why would someone like you want to be like me?" "You're the ninja my country needs in this hour of need. I want to protect my nation by becoming that," replied Yahiko with integrity. Naruto looked the boy in the eye and asked gravely, "And why the hell would I even dream of helping you?" Yahiko hesitated. As he gazed into Naruto's eyes, his desire to defend his country ultimately triumphed over all other emotions, despite his mind racing with millions of ideas. "I don't have any money or power to offer you. All I have is my ability to fight and my loyalty. I can only offer you that," truly stated Yahiko. As Naruto gazed up at the sky, he noticed that Yahiko's expression was similar to that of a young child who had made the same offer to a cage years before. To find his place in this harsh world, in return for a reason to live. It would be so simple to turn this boy away, but... Yahiko grinned as Naruto reprimanded him, saying, "My path is not for the weak or the naive. And don't pledge something noble like loyalty so easily." With seriousness, Yahiko said, "Stop trying to make me give up. I will believe and follow you, Uzumaki Naruto." When Yahiko looked up, he saw Naruto staring off into the distance with a sea of pain and sadness lingering in his eyes. Yahiko wouldn't have recognized this expression before, but after fighting with him, he was able to comprehend the depth of the boy's suffering. Yahiko now understood why he was so upset when Yahiko didn't complete his task. "I won't let aim fall." As Naruto heard those words, his eyes widened a little. Perhaps the rain was distorting his vision, but did he see a sea of unadulterated bravery and resolve burning in Yahiko's eyes as he looked down? After giving the younger boy a quick slap on the head, he turned to leave. "Meet me at the southern gate before sunrise tomorrow. We'll see just how far you are willing to go in order to be a true soldier and protect AIM." After saying those words, Naruto left a beaming Yahiko in his wake. At last, he had an opportunity. The following day, Yahiko marched calmly toward the southern gate in the night's darkness. Now wearing a demon mask and mercenary armor, he was no longer an AIM-aligned ninja. As he arrived at his destination, the sky was completely dark and the rain was falling steadily. Before focusing on the wristwatch he was holding, he looked at the Tonto and the army of weapons he was carrying. There was a full minute left. When Naruto materialized next to him out of the shadows this time, he didn't recoil. The older boy wore a demon mask over his face and wore the same attire. "You understand that this is not some official mission for AIM?" Naruto asked sharply. "Yes." With his icy stare penetrating Yahiko's soul, Naruto demanded, "So what do you expect from this mission?" With ferocious eyes in the dark night, Yahiko faithfully replied, "To become strong like you. To do anything possible for the safety of my nation." "Oh, not bad." When a menacing smile appeared on the older boy's face, Yahiko shuddered. Even though Naruto's face was hidden by the demon mask, it was clear from just one glance that the boy was grinning. "I'll guide you then. If you betray me or fail in the task assigned to you, I'll kill you," icily promised Naruto. "Understood, Captain," Yahiko said with assurance, suppressing his inner tension. After glancing at Yahiko's masked face and looking into the younger boy's eyes for a few prolonged seconds, the Uzumaki nodded and began to move forward. Then welcome to the Akatsuki. An exhilarating sensation was born in the Uzumaki's heart, causing one of his eyes to turn red and his dark chakra to spill uncontrollably. He felt himself approaching Konoha more and more with every step he took. The village that had destroyed his people was no longer relevant because it was time for retribution. Unsettling. As he moved through the lengthy, dim hallway of the Akatsuki base, it was all that Yahiko could sense. The older boy apparently didn't find the 100 people kneeling around them in dark red robes from head to toe creepy at all, as Naruto walked calmly in front of him. These individuals' faces were covered in various demon masks. Perhaps this was due to genjutsu or another tool, but it caused their eyes to glow a demonic red. It is indeed creepy. Two people stood at the end of the hall. Men. One of them had slimy gray hair that was neatly combed backwards and was of average height. The man was holding a nasty scythe, which made Yahiko even more vigilant despite his bare chest. What really frightened him, though, was the other one. He was almost twice as big as his partner and the tallest person in the hall. A monstrous sword was affixed to his back, and his skin was blue. Oddly, he had on a Kiri headband and smiled like a shark when he saw Naruto coming. What sort of spooky individuals did Naruto work for? Naruto smiled slyly and said, "Kisame, what a surprise." The blue man's smile widened as he reached into his pockets for something. When he eventually located what he was looking for, he threw it in Naruto's direction. Kisame smiled and said, "Got you something special." Yahiko sneaked a peek because his curiosity got the better of him, and he almost cringed at what he saw. What, can't these people be normal? He was shocked to see Naruto grinning, a real one, too. Because he was holding a special mask. He put it on right away without wasting any time. When the crazy older boy turned around with his new toy, Yahiko almost yelled. With the exception of his left eye, which glowed a bright red, Naruto's entire face was hidden behind a leather black mask. He had the appearance of a cannibal due to a row of human teeth in the mouth area. He appeared to be a very dangerous predator when you combined that with his completely black armor. Kisame looked at Hidan and teased, thought the leader should look different from the cannon fodder. Hidan shouted, "Who you calling cannon fodder, fish cake?" When Kisame merely cut Hidan's right hand with his sword, Yahiko's breathing stopped. The injured man screamed in agony, but what really startled Yahiko was Naruto's disinterested expression as he looked at Kisame. "He's useful, Kisame. Fix him up before he messes my ears," yelled Naruto. Kisame just shrugged and walked over to the yelling Hidan. Yahiko watched helplessly as Kisame just picked up the cut arm and put it back together. Hidan returned to normal in a matter of minutes as his muscles and veins grew back. That didn't stop him from ranting, though. That is, until Naruto's brows moved. "Hidan, shut up." The scythe wielder blanched and abruptly stopped his digression, as if that were sufficient. With a charming smile, Naruto gave the taller man a grateful shoulder pat. Like a pet, almost. Kisame made the red-headed person shrug and said, "Interesting little shits you've got, Naruto." Naruto received a nod in response to his statement, "They're not the brightest bulbs but useful nonetheless. So, what brings you here? I didn't send for you. The Mizukage sent me to investigate the brewing conflict between Konoha and Suna. A recon mission, but then I caught sight of this idiot here. Blabbing his mouth in a bar full of bandits and low lives about how great his leader was and how the Akatsuki would screw over all the villages. It was when he actually mentioned his leader using dark powers that I knew it was you. So I followed him here," carelessly explained Kisame to Hidan. Yahiko felt cold creep up his spine and shivered as the hall's atmosphere dropped a few degrees. As the Dark Lord's ominous gaze swept over him, Hidan fell to his knees. Stupidly, Hidan said, "I'm sorry," Naruto sighed. Naruto said wearily, "You're not even smart enough for me to punish you." Hidan let out a sigh of relief, "But that doesn't mean I won't." When Hidan screamed and a burning mark in the shape of a skull appeared on his right hand, Yahiko turned pale. None of the other members flinched or moved as the Akatsuki writhed on the ground from side to side. They appeared to be soulless and unconcerned about their comrade's fate. Kisame gave a savage smile, but was let down when Naruto abruptly stopped. Kisame complained, "And here I was enjoying the show." The Kiri ninja laughed as Naruto taunted him, "Oh, shut up, you sadistic freak." Kisame teased, "Never a dull day with you, leader. You're the Akatsuki leader." The question was posed by Yahiko, and both men turned to face him. Yahiko became even more tense when Naruto raised his only visible eyebrow because the older boy's visible eye was still blood red like a demon. Naruto said sweetly, "Oh, I forgot. How silly of me." As he edged closer to Yahiko, Kisame questioned menacingly, "You have no problem with that, do you?" "No." Yahiko's responses to Kisami's innocuous threats made Naruto laugh. Despite his innocence, the boy was entertaining. Like a younger brother, he could make fun of him and even frighten him if he so desired. Perhaps things won't be so boring going forward. Naruto swept his powers over the kneeling new members as Kisame played with Yahiko. It was simple for him to peek inside their minds because they were so terrified. Other than being able to wield weapons, none of them possessed any noteworthy abilities. They wouldn't hold up well against skilled ninja, but they were still preferable to nothing. Luckily, only a few of them were able to use chakra, and none of them were spies. They would. Many of his new minions were unconscious by the time he finished examining them. His presence was simply too much for their frail minds to handle. With a sigh, he stopped scouting and merely motioned for Kisame, Hidan, and Yahiko to follow him. Around a long table, the four of them sat. Hidan sat on the other side, and Yahiko sat nervously next to Kisame. Naruto was examining a pile of reports while seated in the middle of the table. And based on his tight expression, it had not gone well. "You sure these numbers are accurate?" Naruto asked gravely, looking at Hidan. With pride, Hidan remarked, "Of course, my lord. I scouted them myself." Naruto muttered, "That's why I doubt them," which caused Yahiko to smile subtly. They were eerie, but they were funny. Additionally, he had already assured Naruto that he would comply with all of his requests as long as he developed into a real ninja. And Yahiko desired to keep that pledge. He was only here to learn, not to pass judgment. That thought, for some reason, helped him endure everything that was going on inside the Akatsuki, or Naruto's position as the leader. Naruto handed the pile of documents to his two allies and said, "Kisame, Yahiko, take a look at these reports and let me know what you think." An understatement would be to say they were taken aback. Suna was the weakest of the Great Five, as was well known. But to believe that even with the Sandaime Kazekage in charge, they were this helpless? Within 2 weeks, Konoha had taken control of all Suna's border towns, wiped out all outposts, and slaughtered hundreds of sand ninja, with a number of others apprehended. One shinobi was the cause of these losses, the Yellow Flash. The frightened sand ninja had chosen to refer to their foe as such. Yahiko reluctantly asked, "Naruto, could you explain how a war between Suna and Konoha is a threat to AIM?" And the older boy nodded. "At this rate, Suna will fall, which will destroy the power balance. Konoha will annex Suna's territory and powers, which would make it even more dangerous. Iwa would not stand back for that and will intervene. Soon enough you'll have 3 superpowers fighting extremely close to AIM's borders, and it won't take much time before they use AIM as their battlefield," bluntly stated Naruto, while Yahiko sighed. If that were to occur, AIM would be completely destroyed. In fact, Naruto was taken aback when Yahiko's normally innocent eyes took on a chilly expression. "Tell me, what do I have to do?" Yahiko humbly asked. The younger boy turned away as Naruto asked inquisitively, "Where are your morals now?" "I was wrong. In this world what matters most is protecting what you hold dear. For me that is AIM and my friends as well as my family. For them to remain safe, I am willing to do anything. Even sell my soul," replied Yahiko bluntly. To his surprise, Naruto smiled proudly at him. The Kiri swordsman scowled as Naruto said, "That's what I wanted to hear. Kisame, it'll be a few days before I determine where to strike. Train this brat until then." "Why would I do that?" Kisame asked angrily. Naruto let out a sigh. Naruto gave in and said, "Okay, I'll owe you a favor then." Kisame grinned and said, I'll hold you to that," before turning to face Yahiko, who merely shivered. When the AIM boy turned to face Naruto, he nodded, and Yahiko gave him a tentative nod in return. "Hidan, you'll be coming with me. We'll scout out and determine where it'll hurt Konoha's forces the most. It is imperative that we halt their invasion in Suna at all costs," instructed Naruto. "It will be a privilege to fight alongside you, my lord," Hidan enthusiastically replied. "Make no mistake, we're not going there to fight but to scout. The fighting will take place when I make sure everything is set, not before that." "Understood?" replied Naruto sternly. Everybody gave a nod. A few hours later, Naruto and his companion strolled leisurely through Fire Country's thick forests. They were out in the open, where anyone could see them. Masks were placed over their faces. Hidan's mask revealed the face of a red-eyed demon. Kisame had given Naruto a new mask, which he had put on. The leather and design were pretty nice, he had to admit. It was the ideal outfit for him when combined with his dark cloak and red clouds. Hidan's inventiveness was rewarded with points. Hesitantly, Hidan proposed, "My lord, isn't it dangerous for you to walk in the open like this? It is hostile territory. I haven't sensed anyone for the next few kilometers. Besides, do you doubt my powers, Hidan?" he grumbled. "No, my lord," was Hidan's prompt response. "Good." After that, they were silent for the next 30 minutes. Naruto lacks a topic to discuss that Hidan's simple brain could comprehend, and Hidan is too scared to say anything that could annoy the Dark Lord. Even though Kisame would have been pleasant to talk to, that master swordsman could teach Yahiko a few things that could help the boy in the future. Abruptly, he stopped forcing Hidan to do it again. Before the man even posed a question, Naruto silenced Hidan with a single finger raise. he was attacked by a familiar smell that made his nose twitch. Blood. He heard his partner curse and followed him as he ran, not even waiting for Hidan. However, Naruto's attention was drawn to the blood's odor rather than him. He followed the scent like a drawn hyena. He actually liked the sight of the red lifeblood and the smell of blood, unlike most people who would throw up or feel very uneasy about it. Gave him a sense of belonging. And he had no idea why he was feeling this way. Perhaps he was a fox after all. But his amusement disappeared as soon as he arrived at his destination, because there was a Suna shinobi lying in the middle of a dense bush. A black ops from Anbu. Naruto, who had previously trained Anbu, had been forced to learn everything Uzu knew about the various special forces found in each village, no matter how big or small. He knelt next to the man, who was killed by a stab wound across his chest and a partially sliced open neck. This man somehow escaped his foe, but on the way home, he passed away from his wounds. Naruto scowled. Even he found it difficult to eliminate an Anbu. Such a warrior could only be killed by a Kage, a veteran Junin squad, or another Anbu. And since it only made his problems worse, none of the options pleased him. In addition to the usual red, there were other dark hues in the blood that was gushing from the deceased man's body. It only indicated that the chemicals that had been put into his body had begun to dissolve all of his organs, safeguarding his village's secrets. Naruto said, "Hidan, call your other cult brothers." When his leader noticed him without even looking back, the Akatsuki was not even startled. He also saw the body, and even though he didn't know why the Dark Lord had been alarmed, he was happy to comply with his request. Even as he touched the tattoo on his arm, Hidan asked inquisitively, "You think we'll need their help?" "Perhaps. Go back to the base and amass our forces there. Get Kisame and Yahiko as well as those bandits and low-lives you just recruited. We'll need everything we've got," told Naruto. Hesitantly, Hidan said, "I can't leave you out here alone, my lord," and recoiled when Naruto turned to face him. Naruto took off his mask and breathed in some fresh air instead of being punished for asking his leader such a question. Hidan noticed his leader grinning at that moment. It wasn't a joyful one, though. Naruto vowed, "Don't worry, Hidan. I'm not dying anytime soon." With hesitation, Hidan questioned, "You're going after the enemy who did this, aren't you?" Naruto received a quick nod from his partner as he clarified, "Yes, I'll scout them out. If they have a camp, I'll scout it out as well. I am the only one who can do this task quietly. It'll take me at least 2 days to amass your followers, as well as the others. Add another day to get to whatever location you call us to," said Hidan calmly. "Very well. And Hidan, be prepared to go on a killing spree. I won't stop you." His partner gave him a vicious smile in return. Naruto gladly returned one of them. He followed the trail for several more hours. To evade his assailants, the Suna Anbu had largely covered his tracks thoroughly, but not enough for a highly skilled ninja or another Anbu to pick up some clues about his escape route. And Naruto was greatly pleased with what he found. A camp. Packed with shinobi from Konoha. As the cries of his clansmen who had perished in these lands at the hands of Konoha shinobi cried out for retribution, he found it very difficult to control his bloodlust and anger. However, he managed to restrain his raging emotions somehow. He wouldn't benefit from charging crazily into a camp full of almost 100 expert killers. He had detected some strong chakra signatures, even though the majority of them appeared to be Chunin, and some even Genin. Junin. He had to be wary of them because Konoha valued quality over quantity in terms of soldiers, whereas Iwa valued quantity. Only Kumo ninja were able to match their shinobi's level of skill due to their superior training. He had always been taught by his instructors that while it was simple to attack a group of Konoha shinobi, it was crucial to keep an eye out for the 1 or 2 higher-ranked leaders. Over the years, Konoha had a talent for creating talented shinobi, including Madara, Hiruzen, Tobirama, Hashirama, and many more. Even his own father. He must be reasonably skilled because his old man was a Junin. He paused, thinking of his father. Why he felt conflicted was beyond his comprehension. Even though that man had never supported him, he had at least paid him a visit. It was a nice illusion for Naruto to experience for a few seconds, even if his worry had been unfounded. If nothing else, Minato was superior to his mother. Maybe I'll spare them both. Just in time to make them watch their beloved village burn. Yes, that would be a good payback, thought Naruto with disdain. He waited as a result, like a dangerous predator. In the dark. 3 days later, as Rin worked on one of their fellow Chunin, Obito watched with sadness. Even if the young boy survived, he would never be a shinobi again because he had already lost an eye and one of his arms. The young Uchiha was unable to comprehend the purpose of this conflict. A week had passed since he had reached the front lines, and he had anticipated massive engagements between opposing armies, where everything would depend on a single battle. However, he had to deal with sabotage, assassination attempts, and skirmishes. The Suna shinobi were making every effort to delay their opponent because they knew they couldn't defeat them in a traditional manner. Suna Anbu would frequently wait in the woods, eliminating small groups of people at a time. Supply lines would be cut off by their Junin. They were successful because Konoha's invasion was stopped, even though a few chosen shinobi would kill Konoha army commanders, but only for a short time. The Suna shinobi were also wasting hundreds of lives in the process. Additionally, their chain of command frequently forces them to die in suicide missions on purpose. Obito asked weary, "What's the point of all this?" Kakashi reprimanded the two boys, who were on guard duty outside the medical station at the time and were observing their teammate tending to the injured. "Oi, don't say things like that openly. We're shinobi, we fight for our nation." Obito angrily remarked, "This war is pointless, you know it," which caused his teammate to sigh. "We didn't start it, Obito. Suna did," Kakashi muttered. Even though Kakashi scowled, Obito reprimanded him, "Funny. Suna claims the same thing. They're lying. How can you be so sure? You have seen how they fight, in the long run they'll be beaten. We have a larger army, better trained shinobi, and actually have the power to wage war. Suna doesn't have any of that. Then think why would they risk their own annihilation?" frustrated Obito. Kakashi hesitated. He was unable to dispute the hard facts his friend had given him in spite of everything. The Uchiha were unaware that Tsukumo, Kakashi's own father, had held the same view. While Hiruzen supported peace, the majority of Konoha shinobi did not. Over 10 years had passed since the Second Great Ninja War ended. Due to the Senju brothers, their village had triumphed over all adversaries in both of the previous Great Wars. They still had a number of formidable warriors, including Hiruzen, Kagami, Danzo, the Hokage's future 3 students, and several dangerous clans. They had the world's second largest army. History appeared to have woken up and was demanding a great deal of blood. The civilian population was in a state of fear and panic, and Hiruzen had been ordered by the daimyo to crush Suna. This was done ostensibly to protect their country's borders and interests, which was partially accurate. The true cause, however, would be Konoha's dissatisfaction with the Great Five's power dynamics. Its area and power would both increase if it were able to crush Suna, resulting in more business agreements, higher revenue, and the spread of their fear throughout the other villages. The war strategy was prearranged. Additionally, Suna would be just another step toward their country's continued ascent in the shinobi world. Despite its cruelty, it was the norm. The weak perished, but the strong lived. Regarding these political games, Kakashi had little opinion. As a soldier, he wished to protect his fellow soldiers. He lacked the will and the ability to influence their country's future, just as his father had taught him. Obito, however, was unique. His friend had never been like other people his age. Obito wanted peace, while others their age dreamed of great triumphs and individual glory. For everyone on the planet, not just Konoha. To fulfill that dream, the fucking fool even vowed to become Hokage. He was a good friend but naive. Kakashi would also keep him safe. Thankfully, their group and some of their classmates were being kept out of the front lines for the time being. Out there, Minato-sensei and the other seasoned Junin were battling the enemy Anbu squads that were preparing to surprise their troops. The invasion wouldn't start again until they were out of the way. They were based at this garrison, medical, prisoner camp up until that point. Both sides' wounded received care here, while the enemy soldiers were returned to Konoha for detention and additional questioning. The commander of this sector also held office in their camp, where he gave orders to Junin like Minato to fight the enemy. Among the shinobi with the most experience was Kagami Uchiha. The current Uchiha head was a fierce fighter who served under the Naidame and was Hiruzen Sarutobi's teammate. His actual value, however, was revealed in his capacity to lead troops. Kagami's abilities had not waned with age, judging by the losses the enemy was suffering. Kakashi also hoped that this war would end soon, though he didn't express it aloud. If for no other reason than that it would protect his father and his friends. A few kilometers distant, he observed the horde of combatants surrounding him. Even though the majority of them were weak, a force of more than 150 fighters was still formidable. Many of them were members of cults who were difficult to kill and were almost immortal. His best fighters were Hidan, Kisame, and Yahiko. Given that Naruto saw multiple cut marks on Yahiko's body, The orange-haired boy must have endured his own little hell with Kisame. Kisame had been unforgiving, and with good reason. Because Naruto noticed a tiny, icy aura in Yahiko's eyes for the first time, the vicious Kiri shinobi had done a great deal of harm to his innocence. Naruto had drawn a crude map of the Konoha garrison nearby on the ground. A front entrance and a rear entrance were its two entrances. There was a small artificial lake on its right flank and nothing but an open field of grass on its left. In addition to the barrier that would notify the enemy as soon as any of his forces approached, a number of traps were placed throughout the camp. Luckily, he hadn't charged in mindlessly. He had instead patiently waited for a day before capturing a young Chunin group sent on scouting missions. All four of them were questioned. His dangerous powers were too strong for their immature brains. Ultimately, they had exposed every aspect of their defenses. In the desired amount of time, he had returned those four Chunin to the camp. Now, however, they were under his delusion and prepared to follow his instructions when the time came. Naruto gave the order, "When my moles inside the camp act, we shall start our attack." Yahiko inquired inquisitively, "What will be the signal?" "Something loud." Kisame smiled, knowing exactly what his leader was referring to. Their Dark Lord turned to face Hidan and the cult members, who smiled savagely beside him. "I promised you blood and battles, now I shall honor that. Kill everyone in that camp in my name, spare no one. Except for the few captured Suna shinobi that might still be alive," coldly told Naruto. "What about the wounded? You said this camp also hosted the region's forward medical hospital," replied Hidan with seriousness. "I don't take prisoners. Do them a favor and put them out of their misery." Naruto was taken aback this time. He undoubtedly anticipated that Yahiko would object to his immoral actions. A hospital would never be attacked by a respectable army or fighter, but Yahiko remained silent. Naruto turned to Kisame, who smiled proudly, intrigued. Kisame calmly questioned, "Shinobi have no honor. The boy understands that now, doesn't he?" Naruto grinned when Yahiko recoiled slightly. Yahiko reluctantly replied, "Yes, Kisame-sensei. I have to say, I'm pleased. Yahiko, you shall serve under Hidan. Fight beside the cult members. Kisame lead the rest of the bandits." Everyone understands the plan. Any questions? No one said anything. It was time to take action. Uchiha Kagami Senju, a ninja who had witnessed war and the death it brought, was once a proud student of Tobirama. Even though it cost him his beloved teacher, he had been present when Konoha won the Second Great Ninja War. Thankfully, Hiruzen took control, and for over 10 years, their village was at peace. Longer than previously observed. In reality, children had reached adulthood without passing away before the age of 18, and Kagami had high expectations that his own young son Shisui would experience the same outcome. Unfortunately, that was not to be. Hiruzen's wish for peace had been overshadowed by the cowardice of Fire Daimyo and the avarice of his advisors, who backed rich merchants who stood to gain financially from the conflict. A new war had begun. For those idiots, Konoha was causing the deaths of hundreds of their young children. Neither Tobirama nor Hashirama had ever desired this kind of peace. For the sake of his country, however, a soldier fought where he was told to. In order to prevent further losses on both sides, Kagami's only chance now was to defeat the enemy as soon as possible. Additionally, he hoped his own son wouldn't have to put his life in danger. Shisui was still a first-year student at the academy, but even untrained children would be sent to fight in the war if Konoha's losses rose. All he could do was hope that Minato and the other courageous Junin could prevent that. His expectations of the Namikaze were high. He saw in him a future leader who would be able to guide Konoha after the death of Kagami's own generation. Minato was a great father, a strong ninja, a good leader, and a person who showed empathy but was not afraid to kill if his people were in danger. A warrior with Tobirama's intelligence and Hashirama's heart. If the blonde proved himself in this war, it was no surprise that Hiruzen was considering making him the next Hokage. Even his own more senior and influential students, such as Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade, were disregarded. In Kagami's opinion, Minato was already a legendary shinobi because he had successfully imitated Tobirama-sama's Hiroshin. A knock on his door snapped him out of his reverie. The Uchiha leader looked up from the reports on his desk and granted permission. When two young Chunin entered Kagami's office, he sat up straight in his chair. Due to Konoha's need for additional shock troops, they were recently promoted. "Yes?" Kagami inquired eagerly. Suddenly, his seasoned eyes recognized that something was wrong with these Chunin. Their posture was stiff, their shoulders were slightly hunched, and most importantly, their eyes were vacant, devoid of all feelings. The Chunin muttered, "Akatsuki sends their regards." When the explosive tags concealed inside the Chunin's flak jackets exploded, Kagami's Sharingan flared alive and he leapt from his seat. The garrison command center on Konoha was reduced to ashes by a terrible explosion. As the enemy command center was reduced to ashes, Naruto watched. Even if the enemy commander survived, he wouldn't be in good shape, so he wasn't sure. Now that their seasoned leaders have been killed, the frightened young soldiers must be in a state of chaos as the attack had taken place directly in the center of the enemy camp. With icy eyes and an uncaring voice, he gestured with his hand. Naruto thought sorrowfully as the faces of his slain clansmen flashed before his eyes. "This is for Uzu. Commence the operation." Hidan and Yahiko put their hands on the ground and methodically went through a series of hand seals. They hoped that Kisami's forces had blocked the left and rear flanks of the enemy's escape routes. On the right flank, Hidan and his cult members were waiting. Their leader had provided mute charges to all Akatsuki forces. Uzu created a brand new seal that stopped sound from escaping past a specific point. Because of the sheer number of seals their group had deployed, no one would be able to hear the cries for assistance from Konoha forces. Communications and leadership were cut off when the command center was destroyed. The sheep was prepared for slaughter. The signal they had all been waiting for was sent out into the sky in the form of red smoke. Hidan shouted, "Oi, it's time. Let's kill for the Dark Lord." Ho! Yahiko controlled his emotions. He didn't like these people, but Konoha had to lose this war in order for AIM to live. He needed to prove himself because he had not performed his duties well the last time. After inhaling deeply, he pulled out his tanto. With a bloodthirsty grin, Hidan let loose his nasty scythe. "Let's kill some tree huggers, shall we?" Kisami's eyes were shut. Perhaps that was because he had severed Hidan's arm when the cultist had displeased him, but the 100 silent bandits at his side did well to keep their mouths shut. Even so, the Kiri ninja was not pleased with his assignment. Given that the feeble army under his command was only effective as shock troops, he could see why he had been assigned this task. Kisame, however, was no typical ninja. He could see that Naruto was working toward a greater goal by freeing any Suna shinobi who had been captured and were being held captive. He would carry out even this menial task as long as it contributed to the revolution he desired because there was a larger game being played here. He would have to wait, though. Only when the enemy was in total disarray and all of their heavy forces were engaged could he begin his mission to prevent the bandits from being massacred by skilled ninjas. Although Kisame was capable of defeating the majority of the shinobi in that camp, Naruto valued his life more than anyone else's. The idea that he was the most valuable of the Akatsuki was a pleasant one, but it didn't make much of a sentimental difference to the shark-like man. Naruto certainly had a knack for making waves. Kisame was eager to relish the upcoming conflicts and difficulties. Obito and his group rushed in the direction of the flaming command center. When he saw multiple dead shinobi on guard duty or close to the command center, he grimaced. Rin approached the burned people and sadly shook her head when Kakashi gestured for her to do so. "Fortify the defenses." Hearing that voice startled the Uchiha. He turned to the left and saw a Kagami who was seriously injured coming at him. The elder Uchiha and garrison commander suffered severe cuts all over his body, lost his left arm, and had one eye destroyed by wood fragments and shrapnel. The man was just about alive. To Kagami's relief, Rin immediately ran to his side and began her medical ninjutsu. As the squad leader, it was Kakashi's responsibility to inquire for instructions. "Kagami-sama, orders?" he asked professionally. "I have already sent the Junin to the front entrance. Our communication specialist died in the blast. Other Chunin squads are sent to the rear, left and right flank for support. Your squad will accompany me," instructed Kagami. Rin objected, "You cannot move your body," but Kagami shook his head. "Whoever did this managed to subdue my own soldiers, force them to commit suicide by exploding themselves in the command center. They're dangerous, and if we are to survive this, then I cannot sit back. I'm the commander," said Kagami with seriousness. But Kagami smiled slightly when Kakashi rebuked him, saying, "Enough, Obito, Rin. We of all people should understand and support the commander." As Rin assisted him in getting back up, Kagami thought, "It seems your son shall also become a fine shinobi someday, Tsukumo. I'll do my best to protect him." Since she had at least stopped the bleeding, if not completely healed the wounds, the girl was a very quick healer. Kagami smiled at her appreciatively. As the small group ran to the front entrance, no more words were exchanged. Dark smoke hung in the air, encircling the forest ahead, and Kagami narrowed his eyes. he turned on his Sharingan once more. Obito asked, "What's the status, Hoji-senpai?" The young boy caught the Nara-junan's attention. When he saw the commander with them, he saluted immediately, but he recoiled when he saw the old man's state. Their leader equally shocked and moved the other Chunin and Junin. He remained by their side despite this condition. "There's no action here so far. I think the enemy will try to attack our flanks or most probably our rear," said Hoji Nara. Another irate Junin woman said, "Let them. We have set up those series of traps for such situations. No sane enemy would try to hit our front entrance, not if they want to survive." When Kagami brushed past them, they all stopped speculating. The commander remained silent and just took up his position at the front. Dutifully flanking their leader, Kakashi and Obito were perplexed when the elderly man grinned. Speaking calmly, Kagami said, "He's here." When the forest ahead of them began to disappear into complete darkness, Obito's eyes grew wide. He was shocked to learn that this was not an illusion, even though he had channeled his chakra in the hopes that it was. In reality, a wave of darkness was engulfing the forest as it approached them. He witnessed Kakashi, the majority of the Chunin, and even a few young Junin trembling next to him as they were all overcome by emotions of hopelessness, death, and defeat. As the desire to kill intensified, many Chunin began to collapse to their knees, and Obito's own heart felt like it might explode. Even Kakashi started to perspire, and his breathing became labored. But when Kagami's own chakra flared, they were spared their troubles. The old man's energy was warm and provided protection in this despair, whereas the previous chakra was foul and dark. Kagami put a hand on Obito's shoulder, calming his racing heart. Kagami urged, "Believe in yourself. Fight for Konoha as a proud shinobi, all of you." The fighters found hope in those comforting words and kind smile. As they all braced themselves, the resolve and will to fight returned to their once anxious eyes. A solitary figure emerged from the shadows. His face was hidden behind a hideous ghoul mask, and his body was wrapped in a dark cloak spotted with red clouds. Obito was genuinely frightened by the lone red eyes staring at them, but the darkness that had engulfed the forest swirled around him submissively. He gulped at the intensity of the pain, rage, and hatred in those eyes. "Then die for your corrupt nation."
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.